No way. I can't celebrate our wedding anniversary with an ugly wife. Do you really think you're worth anything? You're disgusting. Thank God I'm going on a business trip soon. I don't want to see your face. You're the daughter of a construction company, so find me a nice place to stay, but don't expect much from your little family business that's almost bankrupt. I had hoped to rebuild my relationship with my husband, so I gathered the courage to ask him. But my hope was crushed when he coldly rejected me. The gentle smile he once gave me, saying he would take good care of me, was all a lie. His real intention was to marry the CEO's daughter. Even though my father was the founder and CEO, he worked from a simple office in our home. When my husband learned this, he thought he knew everything about our family business. Since then, he has looked down on me with bitterness. On our wedding anniversary, he made it clear that he planned to spend the night with a woman he truly loved, leaving me behind in despair with a smug smile on his face. My family is in the construction business. Since I graduated from university, I've lived with my parents and worked as an admin assistant to support the business. I didn't want to rely on them forever, so when my grandma passed away, I took over her house and started living on my own. Afterward, I met my husband John through a friend. We connected instantly in every way, including our values, and got married quickly. John and I started our new life together in my house, enjoying our happy days and excited about our promise to celebrate our wedding anniversary every year. However, our joy was dampened by the old house with its creaking floors and stained walls. I sighed, remembering the conversation I had with my father the day before. He suggested we build a new house for our new life. While I wasn't against the idea, the house held so many memories of my beloved grandmother. I was torn between starting a new life with my loving husband and holding on to the memories of my late grandmother. I couldn't decide what to do. Just tear down this old house. Your family is in construction. Can't you even handle something like this? You're just a small, inefficient builder from the countryside, or maybe this house suits a country bumpkin like you. John would snap in frustration whenever the floor creaked or the house made noises. When we first met, he was kind and cheerful. He joked about being intimidated by my job at my father's company, and we laughed together. He proposed to me, promising he'd take better care of me than my parents did. But after we got married and he visited my parents' house, he was shocked. The house was just ordinary, and the office was a small building on the same property. It was nothing like what he had imagined. There were construction materials piled up in the yard. Since then, John always found excuses not to visit my parents and started making degrading comments to me. Later, I heard that he told everyone at work he was marrying the daughter of a company president. I never told him that my family owned a large business. After that, our conversations decreased dramatically, and we began sleeping in separate bedrooms. If you get pregnant by mistake, I feel sorry for our unborn child. Have you ever looked at yourself in the mirror? He would say whenever we saw each other, criticizing my family background and appearance. Eventually, I started to avoid him too. One day, after work, I went shopping and got caught in an unexpected rainstorm. Soaked and shivering, I hurried home and went to the bathroom to take a shower. I noticed the basement floor felt damp, even though I had cleaned it that morning. It seemed like it hadn't dried properly. I hesitated but decided to get warm as quickly as possible. So I took off my wet clothes without thinking much. However, I froze at the uncomfortable feeling that something was wrong. The bathroom was still humid and water droplets clung to the shower curtain and walls. I had cleaned the bathroom the night before, and even if I forgot to turn on the exhaust fan, it seemed unlikely the room would stay that wet until late afternoon the next day. There was even a faint smell of shampoo that wasn't ours. After showering, I texted John to ask if he had come home during the day. He replied with a simple, "Of course not." He should have been at work, busy with his job. But then I found something strange. A gap between the washing machine and the wall revealed his favorite watch. I was sure I had seen him leave the house that morning wearing it. Feeling uneasy, I put on rubber gloves and went back to the bathroom. I pulled the drain in the bathtub and saw it clearly, strands of long hair that were definitely not the same color as mine or John's. There were also a couple of small stones, likely from nail art, tangled in the hair. I rarely got my nails done. Next, I checked John's bedroom and found more of the same long hair, along with the same unfamiliar scent. There was even a smudge of foundation and lipstick on the white bed sheets. That night, feeling sick to my stomach, I decided to check John's phone while he dozed off in the living room. I had been avoiding him by hiding in my room after dinner. He didn't expect me to come out, and after a few drinks, he dropped his phone on the floor and fell asleep in a good mood. I didn't sense any caution from him at all. His cell phone wasn't even locked. A bit surprised, I took advantage of the situation and opened his messaging app. I quickly found messages from the woman he was seeing. I guessed she was his ex-girlfriend. From their conversations, I learned she came from a wealthy family and had left him when she got engaged to another rich man. However, he couldn't get over her and contacted her while she was preparing to move into a luxury apartment her fiancé's parents had bought as a wedding gift. Her fiancé couldn't move in with her yet, and she was struggling with living alone in the new place. It seemed John took advantage of that. To compete with her happy messages, he bragged that he was about to marry the daughter of a construction company. I realized then that he married me just to make his story sound impressive. How pathetic. He had no shame in using me just to show off, and I had been completely fooled. I felt so stupid. I threw his phone on the floor, went back to my room, and cried out loud. I couldn't think straight and didn't even want to think about it. Our relationship had been cold for a while, but I hadn't given up on us. Now I couldn't stay calm. I cried like a child until I couldn't cry anymore. Exhausted, I fell asleep without realizing it. When I woke up, I heard John closing the door as he left for work. I jumped up, quickly cooled my swollen eyelids, and thought again about what I wanted to do. All I could remember was the image of the kind John I once knew. I couldn't believe it had all been an act. He could have easily divorced me when he realized I wasn't what he expected, but he didn't. I thought there might still be a chance for a fresh start. That day, I made his favorite stew and waited for him to come home. I usually made it from scratch, and he had once told me it was the best. I had fond memories of him eating it with a big smile. When he came home, he didn't say anything directly to me, but he ate the stew happily. "Hey, our anniversary is this weekend. Do you remember our promise? Why don't we go out together?" I asked. I was sad and lonely, tired of living like this without being able to talk to each other. "We don't have to do anything special. I just want to be with you. I want to see the same things and have conversations," I said, gathering the courage to tell him. Tears welled up in my eyes. Whether from nervousness or fear, I wasn't sure. I looked into his face, hoping he would take me seriously. But instead, he sneered. "Oh, you're gross. A reclusive pig suddenly wants to be with me on our anniversary. What makes you think you deserve to be celebrated? An anniversary is only worth spending money on if there are feelings involved. Otherwise, it's just another day, nothing special. There's no anniversary with you at all. I don't remember any stupid promises. Stop saying weird things. You're making me nauseous." He glared at me with disdain, as if I were trash, then stormed out, claiming he was going to buy beers. Devastated, I retreated to my room and cried again. That night, he was lying carelessly in the living room, drunk. I wondered if he enjoyed mocking me in his head. I looked at his phone and found that he had made a reservation for a fancy dinner with his mistress on the day of our anniversary. Ironically, it seemed to be the anniversary of their relationship too. Everything about our marriage felt like a mistake. There was never any love from his side. I realized that I was just a misjudged status symbol for him, nothing more than a tool to maintain a basic lifestyle. I collapsed on the spot where he slept peacefully beside me. I trembled, but no tears came. "I'm leaving next week for a month on a business trip, so check out some short-term apartments for me. Your family is in construction, so you can at least find good properties through your connections, right? But maybe a business on the verge of bankruptcy doesn't have that kind of pull," he said with his usual sarcasm before leaving for work. It was almost December, and he was still the same. Normally, I would have been upset by the last-minute notice, but I no longer had the energy or emotion to care. I already knew his trip was a lie, just an excuse to spend more time with his mistress before her wedding. Checking his phone had become a regular habit. I felt guilty and disgusted with myself, but it gave me useful information. "Have a good trip, good luck," I said with an innocent smile, pretending I knew nothing. The following week, as soon as he was out of sight, I made a phone call. "Hello, yes, please start today," I said, then rushed back to my room to get ready. I had been waiting for this moment. I was impatient but excited as I ran out of the house in high spirits. A month later, while I was at work, my cell phone kept ringing. I ignored it because I was busy, but the constant vibration was annoying. I asked my parents for permission to step out and finally answered the call. Yes, what's going on? I asked. When I came back, I found that the house was gone. Completely gone. The land was up for sale too. John was yelling on the other end of the phone so loudly that I didn't need to put it on speaker. Explain what the hell is going on. The house is gone. You told me to get rid of the house as soon as possible, so I asked my father. I thought this was supposed to be my privilege. Why are you complaining when I did exactly what you wanted? I replied calmly, suppressing my laughter as I imagined him panicking. Don't mess with me. There's no way a small business like yours could do this in just 1 month. And the sign has the name of a major company as the contact. There's no way they do a favor for a small, no-name business. Who's behind this? Don't try to fool me. I told you I asked for it. You took one look at my parents' house and assumed it was small and mediocre. Did you ever actually research my family's business? I said, revealing the truth. He seemed to realize something and quickly searched for information on his phone, probably about the company on the sign. He was so stunned that he couldn't say a word. No wonder on the company's website he saw a picture of my father as the CEO. We're a construction company, but we also run various related businesses. Not only do we handle home construction, but demolition and land sales as well. Recently, with inflation affecting business, they were more than happy to help me demolish the house and sell the land. The demolition took only a week. It was their last big job of the year, and the land sold at a pretty good price. I saw it as the last Christmas gift from my beloved grandma. I've been struggling with the decision for a while, but in the end, it helped me make up my mind. John was still speechless despite my cheerful tone. I couldn't see his face, but I imagined he must have been pale and sweating. Don't tell me you threw away all my stuff, my computer, my work files. Damn it. Do you have any idea what you've done? He was half sobbing, panicking about what happened to his belongings. No way, I'm not that heartless. My stuff went to my parents' house, and yours went to the right place. It's a little early, but it's my Christmas gift to you. Please accept it. Oh, and by the way, the boxes should arrive today. I sent them under your name, and I wrote down the address. I'm sure they'll come asking about it. You guys can talk it over and come to an agreement. Where the hell did you send them? He trailed off, so panicked that he forgot to hang up the phone. As I expected, the recipients of the package appeared. Can you please explain what's going on? Asked a man to John's horror. It was the fiancé of his mistress. I had sent John's boxes to their condo. I had already confirmed the address from John's messages. Along with the boxes, I included pictures I had taken of him and his mistress at the hotel and in the condo. The fiancé's family was well known in the area, and I made sure to send the pictures to them as well. On the other end of the phone, I could hear John and his mistress pointing fingers at each other while the outraged fiancé watched. Their engagement was called off, and it looked like a court case was in the works. When the storm passed and John realized he was still on the phone with me, he was furious and started cursing. You're ruining my life. I'm going to ruin yours too. You're worthless, and I'll make you regret this for the rest of your life. You deserve everything you got. How dare you say that without even thinking about what you did? I responded calmly. I won't forgive you ever. This is definitely the end, I said and hung up on John. I immediately called his work and reported his wrongdoing.
I stared at the rumpled sheets, a knot forming in my throat as the truth sank in. The lingering scent of sweat and sex hung heavy in the air, a cruel mockery of the life I thought I had. How could he? How could she? Cynthia? Rick's voice trembled with guilt as he pulled the covers up, his bare chest glistening with perspiration. It's not what it looks like. I wanted to scream, to lash out at the two people I loved most in this world, but all I could muster was a bitter laugh. Really? Because it sure as hell looks like you were screwing my little sister in our bed. Kristen's face was buried in her hands, her slender frame shaking with sobs. Sin, I'm so sorry. Don't, I snapped, my voice like shattered glass. Just don't. Rick reached for me, his expression a mask of desperation. Baby, please, let me explain. I recoiled from his touch, bile rising in my throat. Explain what? That you betrayed me with the one person I should have been able to trust above all others? That you turned our home, our marriage, into a cheap motel room tryst? It was a mistake, he pleaded, tears welling in his eyes. A horrible, stupid mistake. It'll never happen again, I swear. I barked out a harsh laugh, raking my fingers through my hair. You're damn right it won't, because we're done, Rick. Over. I want you both out of my house by tomorrow night. Sin, no, Kristen cried, clutching the sheets to her naked body. Please, we never meant to hurt you. Well, you did. The anguish lanced through me like a white-hot blade. You betrayed me in the worst possible way, and I'll never be able to look at either of you the same again. Rick reached for me again, but I shoved him away, my anger and hurt overriding any lingering love. Don't touch me. Just get your things and go. We're through. As I stormed out, the enormity of what had happened threatened to crush me. My life, my family, everything I held dear, shattered in an instant by the two people I trusted most. The incessant knocking at my door wouldn't stop. I knew it was Rick, begging for another chance like he had been all week. Part of me wanted to ignore him, to shut out his pleas and hollow promises. But a larger part, the part that still foolishly clung to the memories of happier times, compelled me to answer. What do you want, Rick? I sighed, pulling open the door to find him disheveled and bleary-eyed. Sin, please, you have to listen to me. He reached for my hand, but I snatched it away. It was one stupid mistake, that's all, a moment of weakness that'll never happen again. I scoffed, crossing my arms over my chest. With my own sister? How could you do that to me, to us? Tears welled in his eyes as he dropped to his knees. I don't know, baby. I was drunk and angry, and she was there, comforting me. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, he trailed off, burying his face in his hands. God, I'm so sorry. You have to believe me. For a moment, a fleeting moment, I almost did believe him. The anguish in his voice, the raw emotion etched on his face, it tugged at the fragile threads still tying me to this broken man. But then the image of them tangled together, naked and sweating, flashed before my eyes, and a fresh wave of rage washed over me. Get up, I spat, pulling him to his feet with surprising strength. Get up and look me in the eye when you're begging for another chance you don't deserve. His eyes were wild, desperate. Sin, I love you. What we have had, it's real. Don't throw it all away because of one horrible lapse in judgment. One lapse? I shook my head in disbelief. Rick, you slept with my baby sister, in our marriage bed. How can I ever trust you again after that kind of betrayal? You can, he insisted, grasping my shoulders. I'll do anything at all to prove myself to you. Just say you'll give me another shot. For a long moment, I searched his eyes for any hint of the man I fell in love with all those years ago. The man who held my hand on our first date, who cried tears of joy when I walked down the aisle, who promised to love and cherish me until the end of our days. But all I saw was a broken shell, a man hollowed out by his own selfish lies and infidelity. No, I said, my voice quiet but firm. It's over, Rick. The papers will be filed in the morning. As I shut the door, blocking out his anguished wails, I felt something inside me harden. He made his choice when he betrayed me so completely. And now it was my turn to choose, to fight for what was left of my life and my dignity. No matter how much it hurt, the cramped bathroom felt suffocating as I stared at the two pink lines glaring back at me. Pregnant. Of all the twists this nightmare could have taken, I never expected this. A harsh laugh escaped my lips as I sank to the cold tile floor, my back against the wall. Of course I would be pregnant with Rick's child in the midst of his affair with Kristen. The universe had quite the cruel sense of irony. Part of me wanted to grab the test and hurl it across the room, to scream and rage against this latest cosmic injustice. But a larger part felt an overwhelming sense of calm wash over me. This baby, innocent and pure, was the one good thing to come from the ashes of my marriage. My child. Mine alone to love and cherish, free from the stain of their father's betrayal. The decision was made before I could second-guess it. I would keep this baby and raise it on my own if I had to. Rick didn't deserve to be part of its life, not after what he'd done. The buzz of my phone shook me from my reverie. Kristen's name flashed across the screen, no doubt another tortured plea for forgiveness to join the dozens already clogging my voicemail. With a surge of anger, I hurled the phone against the wall, watching it shatter into pieces. Sin? Rick's muffled voice came through the door. Everything okay in there? I almost laughed at the absurdity of his question, as if anything could ever be okay between us again. I'm pregnant, I called out, my voice eerily calm. The test just confirmed it. There was a long pause before he responded. Are you sure it's mine? White-hot rage lanced through me at his implication. "Of course it's yours, you son of a bitch," I roared, leaping to my feet. Who else's would it be? The door flew open, and he stood there, hands raised in surrender. "Sin, I didn't mean it like that. I need to know for sure." "Well, you can be damn sure," I spat, shoving past him into the bedroom. "I haven't been with anyone else, unlike you." He flinched at the venom in my words, but pressed on. Okay, I believe you. Just please let me be a part of this baby's life." I whirled on him, eyes blazing with fury. "After what you did? After destroying everything we built together by screwing my own sister? You don't get that right, Rick. Not anymore." His face crumpled in anguish. "Sin, please, I'm begging you, that baby, it's all I have left now." "No," I said, my voice hardening to steel. "You made your choices, just like I'm making mine. And I choose to raise this child away from the toxicity of your lies and betrayal. We're through." As the tears streamed down his cheeks, I felt something inside me finally break free. The naive, love-struck girl who thought her fairy tale would last forever. In her place stood a woman reborn, hardened by the cruelest of life's realities, yet stronger for having survived it. I was done being the victim. From now on, I would be the author of my own destiny, and Rick would play no part in it. The baby kicked insistently, as if sensing the tension radiating off me. I rubbed my swollen belly, trying in vain to soothe the life growing inside me, a life that would soon be thrust into the chaos of my crumbling world. "You can't be serious, Cynthia." Rick's voice was laced with disbelief and more than a hint of anger. "Asking for that much in the settlement is highway robbery." I met his gaze levelly, my jaw set. "I'm deadly serious. After what you put me through, I deserve every penny." He raked his fingers through his thinning hair, pacing the length of the lawyer's office. "But that amount, it'll leave me with next to nothing to start over with. Where's the fairness in that?" A harsh laugh escaped my lips. "Fairness? You want to talk to me about fairness after you cheated on me with my own flesh and blood?" I leaned forward, my eyes boring into his. "I bent over backwards to make our marriage work, to build a life with you. And you threw it all away for what? A cheap thrill with my baby sister?" Rick flinched as if I'd struck him. Good. I wanted my words to cut deep, to make him feel even an ounce of the pain he'd inflicted on me. "Sin, please." He dropped to his knees in front of me, clasping my hands in his clammy grip. "I was a fool, an absolute idiot, but you have to believe I never meant to hurt you like this. I love you more than anything." I snatched my hands away, bile rising in my throat. "Save it for someone who still believes your lies, Rick. I'm through being made a fool of." His face crumpled, the mask of the repentant husband slipping. "So that's it, then? You're just going to take me for everything I've got and leave me destitute?" "I'm taking what I deserve," I shot back, rising to my feet with effort. "A chance to get back on my feet and provide for this baby without having to rely on you for a damn thing." Rick's eyes narrowed to slits. "You're making a huge mistake here, Cynthia. Don't think for a second the courts will side with you over this." I matched his glare with one of my own. "I have a pretty strong case, as I recall. A cheating husband who lied and betrayed his heavily pregnant wife in the worst way imaginable." I shook my head slowly. "I like my chances just fine, thanks." As I turned to leave, the fight seeming to drain from Rick's body, a tiny voice inside whispered that maybe I was going too far, that the settlement figure I'd named was perhaps too steep, too vengeful. But another voice, louder and more insistent, drowned it out. This was what he deserved, I told myself, the consequences of his unforgivable actions. If it broke him, so be it. He'd brought it on himself. He didn't get to play the victim, not this time, not after everything he'd taken from me. The pounding on my door was incessant, jarring me from the first decent sleep I'd gotten in weeks. I knew without looking who it would be, the same person who had shattered what little peace remained in my life. Throwing on a robe, I flung open the door to find Kristen standing there, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "What do you want?" I spat before she could speak. "Here to rub my face in your home-wrecking ways again?" She flinched as if I'd struck her. "Good. Sin, please. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but you have to hear me out." "I don't have to do a damn thing," I shot back, arms crossed over my chest. "You made your bed when you slithered into mine with my husband. Now you can lie in it." Tears spilled down her blotchy cheeks. I'm pregnant, Sin, with Rick's baby. The words hung in the air like a suffocating fog as I struggled to process them. Of course she was pregnant too. The universe just loved twisting the knife deeper with each new torture. Well, isn't that just perfect? I laughed bitterly. The two lying, cheating snakes get to play family while I raise my child alone. How storybook of you both. No. She reached for me, but I jerked away. No, Sin, you don't understand. I need your help. I stared at her incredulously. My help? After you stabbed me in the back in the worst way imaginable, what makes you think I'd lift a finger to help you? Kristen's eyes were wild, pleading. Because Rick, he wants nothing to do with this baby. He said it'll ruin his chances of getting back together with you. White-hot rage lanced through me at her words. Of course, that bastard would try to weasel his way out of this, to pretend the ultimate consequence of his actions didn't exist. Just like he'd tried to pretend his affair was some momentary lapse, a blip to be forgotten. So what? I shrugged, feigning indifference. Sounds like a personal problem to me. You two can sort out your own messes. But I can't do this alone, she wailed, fresh tears streaming down her face. I don't have anyone else, Sin. You're my family. Family. The word was like a physical slap across my face. This snake who had violated the sanctity of my family in the worst way was trying to claim that bond again? After everything? You lost any right to call me family the second you spread your legs for my husband? I hissed, poking her sharply in the chest. As far as I'm concerned, you're just the worthless homewrecker he stepped out with, nothing more. Her face crumpled in anguish, but I was beyond caring. Let her feel the slightest fraction of the pain she'd inflicted upon me. It was the least she deserved. Now get off my porch, I said, my voice dangerously low, and if I ever see your face again, I can't be held responsible for what I might do. As she turned and fled, I slammed the door behind her, the sound echoing through the hall like a gunshot. My hands were shaking, every muscle taut, as the weight of her words finally hit me. Rick was going to be a father again. With her. The idea was like acid burning through my veins. If he thought for 1 second that he could just walk away from this, from them, he had another thing coming. I would make sure he paid for this latest betrayal, if it was the last thing I ever did. The courtroom was deathly silent as the judge cleared his throat, envelope in hand. This was it, the moment that would decide just how far Rick's lies and betrayal had really gone. The DNA results confirm that Mr. Richard Moore. The judge paused, eyes flickering between Rick and a visibly distraught Kristen. Is not the biological father of the child Miss Randall is carrying. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery, but I remained motionless, utterly unsurprised. Of course he wasn't the father, just another lie in the tangled web he'd spun. Rick, however, looked as though he'd been struck. What? That's impossible. She said. Liar! Kristen screeched, rounding on him with balled fists. You lied to me, you bastard. Told me it was yours, so I'd leave Sin alone. I watched impassively as the court officers struggled to restrain her, something like pity stirring in my chest. She was just another of his victims. Really, a fool led astray by his silver tongue. The judge pounded his gavel, restoring order. If we could return to the matter at hand. His steely gaze fell on Rick. Mr. Moore, you'd also be wise to take this opportunity to revise the financial statements you submitted during these proceedings. A bead of sweat trickled down Rick's brow as he tugged at his collar. I'm not sure what you mean, Your Honor. Oh, I think you know exactly what I mean. The judge's tone brooked no argument. The tax documents and income statements we subpoenaed paint a very different picture than what you originally claimed. My head whipped around as I studied Rick's ashen face. He couldn't have, could he? Not after everything. But his silence, his refusal to meet my eyes, spoke volumes. You lied. The words slipped out in a hoarse whisper. You lied about your finances, too, to try and cheat me out of what I deserved. Rick opened his mouth, then closed it, shaking his head slowly. In that moment, I saw him for what he truly was, a sniveling coward who would do or say anything to save his own skin. My heart twisted violently in my chest. The judge fixed him with a withering stare. Mr. Moore, you have committed perjury and fraud upon this court with your falsified financial records. Not only that, but you engaged in a reprehensible pattern of lies and deceit that allowed this entire fiasco to unfold. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in as the courtroom held its collective breath. Therefore, I am awarding the entirety of the settlement amount requested by Mrs. Moore, in addition to the marital home and all other major assets. His gaze bored into Rick's stunned face. You have only your own dishonorable actions to blame for these consequences, sir. This ruling is final. The world seemed to tilt wildly around me as the judge's words echoed through the chamber. I'd won. I'd beaten him at his own lying game and taken everything in the process. A hollow victory, to be sure, but a victory nonetheless. As the bailiffs led a shattered Rick away, I caught his eye one last time. Any remnants of the man I'd loved, the man I'd devoted half my life to, were gone, burned away by the flames of his selfish deceptions. In their place was a broken husk, a sobbing wretch brought low by his own karmic reckoning. And as he disappeared through the door, I knew I would never look upon his face again. The spacious home felt cavernous and empty as I wandered its halls, my son Jacob babbling happily in my arms. This place, which had once represented the life Rick and I strived to build together, now stood as a monument to his failures. Every gleaming surface, every expensive furnishing, had been bought with the hard-earned money he tried so desperately to keep from me. The money that was rightfully mine after his countless lies and betrayals. A hollow victory, to be sure, but a victory nonetheless. Jacob's tiny hands patted my cheeks, drawing my attention back to his cherubic face. In that moment, watching his bright eyes crinkle with laughter, I knew I had made the right choice. This house, this life I was building from the ashes, was all for him now. Rick was merely a speck in the rearview mirror, a crucial step on the journey that led me here, but no longer a presence in our lives. I had survived his deceit and emerged stronger, more resilient than I could have imagined. The buzzer rang, shattering the moment's peace. Shifting Jacob to my hip, I made my way to the intercom, the voice identification system cheerily announcing, "Kristen Randall at the gate." I froze, hot anger lancing through me. The audacity of that snake, showing her face here after everything she'd done. I should have known better than to expect her to slink back into the hole she'd crawled out of. "Ma'am?" The AI's chipper voice piped up again. "Shall I admit the visitor or send them away?" Jaw clenched, I stabbed the comm button. "What do you want, Kristen? Here to try and weasel your way back into my good graces again?" There was a pause, then a tremulous sigh. "Sin, please. I know I'm the last person you want to see right now, but I really need your help." I barked out a harsh laugh. "My help? After you slept with my husband and tried to trap him with a baby that wasn't even his? You've got one hell of a nerve showing up here." I know. Her voice cracked with desperation. "Believe me, I know how badly I've messed up, how much I've hurt you. But Sin, I'm homeless. I've got nowhere else to go." The words hung in the air, deflating my anger for just a moment. As much as I despised her for her actions, she was still my sister, my blood. Could I really turn her away to fend for herself? Jacob gurgled softly, nuzzling my neck, and my resolve hardened once more. She might share my DNA, but she had long since forfeited the honor of being treated like family. "That's not my problem," I said, coldness seeping into my tone. "You made your bed when you betrayed me in the worst way. Now you can lie in it." "Sin, wait." Her voice was thick with panic. "I'm pregnant! For real this time! I can't raise this baby on the streets, please!" I recoiled as if struck, bile rising in my throat. Of course, she would stoop to that level of deception again, using an innocent child as a pawn in her twisted mind games. "Save your lies, Kristen," I spat, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I don't have anything left to give you. No money, no shelter, no help. You're on your own." As her muffled sobs faded, I slumped against the wall, cradling Jacob close. In that moment, I pitied her even as I reviled her very existence, for she was well and truly alone in this world of her own making. But not me. Never again. I had my son, my beautiful reason for persevering through all the darkness. And as long as he was by my side, I knew I could overcome any challenge, any deception. Rick's betrayal may have tried to break me, but it had also remade me into a fiercer, more uncompromising version of myself. One that would never let anyone jeopardize the life I was building for me and my child. Not Kristen. Not Rick himself. No one. The sun-dappled park was alive with the sounds of children at play, their laughter ringing out across the vibrant green expanse. I smiled as Jacob raced ahead of me, his tiny legs pumping furiously as he chased after a kaleidoscope of bubbles. So much had changed in the 5 years since that fateful night, the one that shattered my world and set me on this new path as a single mother. Yet watching my son's face light up with unbridled joy, I knew all the pain and heartache had been worth it 1,000 times over. "Mommy, Mommy, look how high I can swing!" Jacob's excited voice drew my gaze to the playground, where he was launching himself into the air with reckless abandon. Chuckling, I made my way over, ready to rein in his antics before he gave himself a concussion. "All right, little daredevil, let's take it down a notch before you." The words caught in my throat as my eyes landed on a hunched, disheveled figure sitting alone on a nearby bench. Even from a distance, the stringy hair, sallow complexion, and haunted eyes were instantly recognizable. Rick? A lead weight formed in the pit of my stomach as Jacob continued playing, oblivious to the ghost from our past. Part of me wanted to grab his hand and flee, to shield him from the man who had put us through so much pain and anguish. But another part, the part that had grown stronger and more resilient with each passing year, felt something else stirring inside me. Not anger, nor hatred, but pity. Steeling myself, I made my way towards the bench, my heart pounding in my ears. Up close, the toll of Rick's lies and deceptions was even more stark. His clothes hung loosely, his face etched with lines that made him appear decades older than his years. Well, I said softly, watching as his head snapped up in shock. "If it isn't the master of deception himself, fancy meeting you here." Rick's eyes widened as he took me in, his hands visibly trembling. "See? Cynthia? Is that really you?" "In the flesh," I gestured vaguely at his haggard appearance. "Looks like the last few years haven't been too kind to you, Rick." He flinched as though I'd struck him, turning his gaze downward in shame. "Yeah, well, I guess that's what happens when you lose everything due to your own stupidity." An uncomfortable silence stretched between us, punctuated only by Jacob's peals of laughter in the distance. Part of me felt a twisted sense of satisfaction at seeing the great lie spinner brought so low, but the larger part simply felt sadness. For the broken man before me, and for the bright future we had once dreamed of building together. "You know," I said at last, "for what it's worth, I did love you once, with everything I had." Rick's shoulders slumped as he nodded jerkily. "I know, believe me, I know, and not a day goes by that I don't regret throwing that all away." "Well, regrets won't change the past." I shrugged, turning to watch Jacob scramble up the slide. "All we can do is try to learn from our mistakes and do better going forward." As if sensing the weight of our conversation, Jacob raced over and flung himself into my arms, his bright eyes shining with adoration. In that moment, I knew I had all the love and joy I would ever need right here. "Who's this, Mommy?" he asked innocently, pointing at Rick. I opened my mouth, 1,000 bitter recriminations rising to my lips. But one look at my son's cherubic face, and I realized Rick's deceptions were in the past. The struggles he had put us through had only served to make me stronger, more resilient, more able to cherish the family I had fought so hard to build. "No one important, baby," I murmured, kissing Jacob's brow. "Just a ghost letting go of its chains. Let's go get some ice cream." As we turned and walked away, leaving Rick to watch with slumped shoulders, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. His mistakes, his lies, they no longer had any power over me or my life. I was free to love, to laugh, to live my life on my own terms, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. I slammed the front door behind me, my hands trembling with rage. The image of my husband Caleb, tangled in bed with my own sister Jenna, was seared into my mind, an unspeakable betrayal that shattered my world. "You lying, cheating bastard," I screamed, storming into the bedroom. Caleb sprang up, his face drained of color as Jenna clutched the sheets around her naked body. "Vivian? I can explain," Caleb stammered, panic flashing in his eyes. "Explain what?" I spat. "That you've been screwing my own flesh and blood behind my back?" Jenna tossed her head defiantly. "Don't act so shocked, sis. You're just an old boring wife. He needs a woman who can keep him excited." White-hot fury flooded my veins as I fought the urge to lunge at her. Caleb stepped between us, his expression a sickening mix of guilt and desperation. "Baby, you're imagining things. This isn't what it looks like. Don't you dare gaslight me." I raged at my husband of 12 years. I saw it with my own eyes. How could you do this to me, to our marriage? Jenna smirked. Face it, Viv. He got tired of your career-obsessed act. I'm just giving him what he really wants. Revulsion churned in my gut as I took in her smug, self-satisfied sneer. This was my baby sister, the girl I helped raise after our parents died, and she had violated the ultimate taboo by sleeping with my husband in our marital bed. Get out, I said in a low, trembling voice. Both of you. Get your things and get out of my house right now. Caleb refused to leave that night, claiming the house was as much his as mine. I spent a sleepless night on the couch, my mind replaying the sordid scene over and over. How could the man I loved, the man who had once doted on me, betray me in such a cruel way? And with Jenna, of all people. As the sun rose, I dragged myself up and poured a strong coffee, needing to be clear-headed. I opened the photo album stuffed in the hall closet, flipping through the happy memories of our early years together. We had been the perfect power couple. I was a rising star at Boston's most prestigious law firm, while Caleb had started his own construction company from the ground up. Putting in grueling hours, we lifted each other up, my legal skills helping him win big contracts. His business began thriving, allowing me to take a slightly less demanding role to try for the family we both desperately wanted. But after years of fertility treatments and heartbreak, Caleb grew resentful of the sacrifices he'd made. He started staying later at work sites, picking fights over little things. I was too wrapped up in keeping my career afloat to see the cracks in our foundation. You look like hell, Caleb's gruff voice made me jump. He stood in the hallway, already dressed for work in his dusty boots. Gee, I wonder why, I shot back acidly. My husband's been cheating on me with my own sister. That might mess with someone's beauty sleep. He sighed, raking a hand through his graying hair. I never meant to hurt you, Viv. Things just got out of hand with Jenna. Oh, so it just accidentally fell into her? That's quite a feat. Anger flashed across his face. Don't get snarky with me. You've been married to your job for years, while I killed myself providing for us. Providing for us? I laughed bitterly. My 6-figure salary is the only reason your little construction gig ever got off the ground in the first place. The barb struck home. Caleb's jaw clenched as he grabbed his truck keys. I'm not doing this with you. I've got work to get to. That's what you're best at, I called after him. Walking away from your problems. The front door slammed, leaving me alone with the shattered pieces of my life. I looked at our happy wedding photo, wondering when everything had gone so wrong between us, and why my own sister had to be the one to destroy it all. Over the next few weeks, I tried to go about my daily life as if nothing had changed, but Caleb's emotional withdrawal from me, from our marriage, was becoming impossible to ignore. He would come home late most nights, reeking of whiskey and avoiding my gaze. I'd try to ask about his day, only to be met with grunts or one-word answers. The man I had fallen in love with, passionate, driven, always ready with a joke to make me laugh, was fading away before my eyes. My suspicions were raised further by the constant presence of Jenna in our lives. Despite the horrific betrayal, she would show up at our house uninvited, demanding Caleb's attention for some drama in her life, and he would drop everything to comfort her, to be her shoulder to cry on. Jenna's going through a really tough time right now, with the divorce, he mumbled one night after getting off the phone with her. I need to swing by and check on her. Again? I asked pointedly. You were just over there last night fixing something at her place. He avoided my accusing stare. She needs me, Viv. Her soon-to-be ex is giving her hell over the house. Well, I need you too, I exploded, feeling the sting of his indifference. Or have you forgotten that small fact? Caleb simply shrugged, grabbing his keys. I'll be back later. Don't wait up. The front door closed with a sense of finality. I stood there, my fists clenched, as the now familiar feelings of dread and denial washed over me. Surely I was imagining things. Caleb may have been pulling away, but he loved me. He would never... My spiraling thoughts were interrupted by the shrill ring of the phone. Jenna's number flashed on the caller ID, taunting me. What? I snapped, unable to hide my hostility. Vivian? Her voice was hushed, almost trembling. I think Caleb is on his way over. I really need you here. My heart plummeted into my stomach. Need me there? For what exactly? There was a pause, then Jenna spoke in that same tremulous tone. I'm scared, sis. I'm all alone, and the noises from outside. I just feel safer when you're around. I squeezed my eyes shut, nausea rising. She was baiting me, testing to see if her lies could reel me in like a foolish, unsuspecting fish. Did she and Caleb think I was that blind? Save it, Jenna, I said in a low, controlled voice. If you want to screw my husband, you can leave me out of it. The line went dead as my worst fears were confirmed. The man I loved and my own traitorous sister were making a mockery of me right under my nose. But I refused to go down without a fight. I knew I couldn't go on like this, living in denial, letting Caleb and Jenna make a fool of me. I needed proof of their affair before I could decide my next move. So I swallowed my pride and hired a private investigator recommended by a friend. Mike Connolly was a no-nonsense ex-cop who didn't blink an eye at the seedier details of my situation. Cheating spouses are a dime a dozen, he said gruffly. I'll get you the evidence you need. A week later, Mike showed up at my office with a thick manila envelope. Sorry it took a little longer than expected, Mrs. Weston. Your husband's craftier than I gave him credit for. My hands shook as I opened the envelope and the damning photos spilled out. There was Caleb, his arms wrapped around Jenna in a passionate embrace outside a cheap motel. Another showed them in an alley, her legs locked around his waist as they kissed hungrily. Bile rose in my throat looking at the graphic proof, but I forced myself to keep going. Mike had also included transcripts of recorded phone conversations that left no doubt about the nature of their affair. You're all I think about every minute of the day. Caleb's voice crackled through the speakers as I hit play. I can't wait to leave that dried-up sexless marriage and be with you, baby. Jenna's throaty laughter made my skin crawl. Don't worry, lover. Once I bleed that cold bitch dry in the divorce, we'll have more than enough to start over together. The vile words kept coming as I sat numb, tears streaming down my cheeks. This was the man I had loved, the man I had sacrificed for year after year, and he saw me as nothing but a walking ATM to use and discard. I've heard enough, I choked out, shutting off the recorder. Mike watched me impassively as I struggled to compose myself. So what's the plan now, Mrs. Weston? You want me to follow him some more, get more evidence for the divorce proceedings? I stared at the lurid photos of my husband and sister, feeling a scorching anger take hold. Divorce wasn't enough, not for the soul-crushing way they had betrayed me, not for their casual discussion of bleeding me dry. No more following, I said in a low, dangerous voice. I've seen all I need to see. Mike frowned. Then what do you want me to do? A slow, vindictive smile spread across my face as the perfect plan took shape. I want you to keep watching them, Mr. Connolly, but not for me. I leaned forward, reveling in the first stirrings of vengeance. For them. Because by the time I'm through, they'll have much bigger problems than a divorce. With the proof of Caleb and Jenna's affair burning a hole in my brain, I forced myself to continue acting normal around them. It wasn't easy, picturing their naked bodies intertwined while Caleb came home and pecked my cheek like nothing had changed. Working late again? I kept my tone light as he grabbed a beer from the fridge. Caleb grunted in response. Yeah, big project coming due. You know how it is. Of course. I gave him a sad smile. I'm just gonna miss you, that's all. He paused, a flicker of something like guilt crossing his face before the usual blankness returned. Don't wait up, he mumbled, already heading for the door. As soon as it closed, my fake smile vanished. Reaching into my purse, I pulled out the burner phone I'd purchased and tapped out a message. He's on the move. Let me know where he ends up. Mike Connolly's response came quickly. You got it. I spent the evening poring over Caleb's financial statements, construction contracts, and other business documents. As a corporate lawyer, I knew all the loopholes, the sleight-of-hand tricks companies use to cut corners. Shady labor practices, environmental violations, tax evasion, you name it, I'd helped clients get around it. Now I would use that knowledge to burn Caleb's entire empire to the ground. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A new address from Mike, along with a terse message. Motel again. White-hot fury lanced through me as I pictured them together, laughing at my oblivious suffering. I wanted to storm over there to scream the truth and make them face the consequences. But I forced myself to stay calm, to keep my eyes on the prize, making them pay in the most devastating way possible. Over the next few weeks, I began deploying a strategic series of anonymous calls and tips to various regulatory agencies, code violations on multiple construction sites, improper disposal of hazardous materials, undocumented workers being paid under the table. At first, it was just minor fines and work stoppages, which Caleb angrily tried to dispute. But I kept hitting him from all sides: the IRS, the EPA, the Department of Labor. His panicked calls and texts went unanswered as I busied myself with other important cases at the office. "What the hell is going on?" he roared when he finally made it home one night, slamming his fist on the counter. "Every single one of my sites is under investigation." I looked up from my book with a neutral expression. "I'm so sorry, babe. I had no idea things were that bad at work." His bloodshot eyes bored into me before he seemed to deflate with a frustrated sigh. I gotta get a handle on this, Viv. The fines are crippling me, and if they actually shut me down..." I crossed the room and placed a soothing hand on his arm, trying not to smirk at the raw panic in his voice. "It'll be okay. You've worked too hard to let this take you down." Caleb pulled me into a stiff hug, his body tense. "I don't know what I'd do without you," he muttered into my hair. "You're about to find out," I thought with grim satisfaction, "because by the time I'm done, you'll have lost everything." The next few months were torture, watching Caleb's world crumble around him. Construction sites were shut down left and right amid the mounting investigations. Fines and legal fees piled up into the millions. Employees walked off the job as payroll bounced. Yet through it all, the smug bastard remained oblivious to the fact that I was the one orchestrating his downfall from the shadows. He tried desperately to get ahead of the allegations, hiring lawyers and consultants to do damage control. But I was always one step ahead, anonymous tip leading to another disastrous blow. Jenna, of course, was firmly by his side the entire time, playing the supportive, concerned girlfriend as Caleb unraveled. No doubt she was counting down the days until his business assets would be stripped away in the divorce, leaving her free to swoop in as his sugar baby. "This is insane, Viv," Caleb yelled one night, pacing furiously as I calmly sipped tea. "They're threatening to pull my contractor's license, to freeze all my accounts." "Well, did you do the things they're accusing you of?" I asked mildly. "Maybe you should just come clean if you've been cutting corners." His face went beet red with rage. "I'm not a crook. Someone is setting me up. Don't you see that?" "Or maybe," a silky voice came from the hallway, "you're just reaping what you sowed after treating your wife and business like dirt for so long." Jenna slinked into the room, eyes glittering with undisguised malice aimed at me. I felt a flicker of disgust at her blatant attempt to turn Caleb against me even further. "Stay out of this, Jen," Caleb growled. "You don't know what the hell you're talking about." But she ignored him, sidling up to rub his arm soothingly. "Poor baby, you're under so much stress. Maybe it's time you finally face the truth. Vivian is the one behind all this." I barely hid my smirk as Caleb's head whipped around, eyes narrowing at me with sudden suspicion. "What is she talking about?" "Think about it, lover," Jenna purred, shooting me a triumphant look. "Who else could be doing this to you? Vivian's a corporate lawyer. She knows all the loopholes, the ways to bleed a company dry from the inside." Caleb opened his mouth, then closed it slowly as realization seemed to dawn. I held his gaze steadily, daring him to break first. "Is it true?" he finally rasped out, fists clenched at his sides. "Have you been the one destroying my life's work all this time, burning everything I built to the ground?" I let out a soft chuckle, reveling in his shock and horror. "Finally caught on, did you? Yeah, it's all been me. Every violation, every fine, every shutdown order." I stood, feeling powerful as I towered over both of their stunned faces. "And I'm not done yet, not by a long shot. You're going to lose everything, Caleb, your business, your money, your reputation, all of it." Jenna's mouth worked soundlessly as I turned my icy glare on her. "And you're going to be left with absolutely nothing when the gravy train dries up. No business to bleed, no man to leech off of." "You bitch," she finally spat out, color rising in her cheeks. "We never did anything wrong. Save it." I held up a hand, digging into my purse to pull out the thick manila envelope. "I have all the proof I need of your sordid little affair, all the photos, all the recordings of your crude pillow talk." I tossed it at their feet, reveling in their twin expressions of shock and shame as the lurid evidence spilled out. So go ahead, I said with a tight smile. Try and talk your way out of this one. I'll be waiting. For days after my grand reveal, Caleb and Jenna avoided me like the plague. He'd leave before I got up and return late, holed up in his study. Jenna stopped coming around altogether, much to my relief. I could feel them stewing, scheming, wondering how to slither their way out of the disastrous situation I'd put them in. Good luck with that, I thought with grim satisfaction. I had them dead to rights. Finally, about a week later, Caleb approached me with hunched shoulders and a hangdog expression. Viv, we need to talk. I arched an eyebrow but remained silent as he sank onto the couch beside me. Up close, I could see his haggard appearance, red-rimmed eyes, graying stubble, the once confident man, utterly broken. I don't know what to say, he began haltingly. What you did, the way you dismantled everything I built from nothing. He shook his head slowly. It was a masterful job. A tiny smirk played across my lips at the begrudging compliment. I do have a particular skill set. You've won, Caleb sighed, dropping his head into his hands. The company is being forcibly dissolved. The banks are seizing assets, properties, there's nothing left. Gee, that's too bad. I inspected my nails nonchalantly. But I'm sure you and Jenna have enough socked away to keep you comfortable for a while, right? His jaw clenched at the mention of her name. Jenna's gone, for good. My eyebrows rose in surprise. Oh, did the little mistress finally get bored once the cash dried up? Don't start, Caleb warned, a flash of anger in his eyes. She's out of my life, out of our lives. Smart man, I murmured, studying him appraisingly. Maybe not such an idiot after all if you dumped the leech. He drew a deep, shuddering breath. Look, you've made your point, okay? You wanted to make me suffer, and you did it. I'm ruined, bankrupt, my whole life destroyed because of my stupid mistakes. I opened my mouth, but he barreled on. The only thing I have left is this house, the house you bled and sacrificed for just as much as me. His eyes bored into me intently. Just take it, Vivian. Take it all in the divorce, and I'll walk away with nothing. You'll have your justice. I felt a surge of vicious glee, but kept my expression neutral. That's an interesting proposal, though forgive me for not exactly trusting you at the moment. I'm not asking you to trust me, Caleb said roughly. I'm asking you to take everything and leave me with the clothes on my back, if that's what you want. It's the least I deserve, after how I treated you. I studied him silently for a long moment, wheels spinning in my mind. This was it. The final delicious act of my revenge, to strip him of every last thing he valued, to leave him a broken, shamed husk of a man. All right, Caleb, I said at last. I'll take your offer. Draw up the papers to sign over this house, the property, everything to me in the divorce, and you'd better not cross me, because if you try to weasel out of it... I let the threat hang in the air. He swallowed hard and gave a solemn nod. You have my word. Just tell me where to sign. I smiled thinly and stood, heading for the kitchen to pour myself a glass of wine. My petty, vindictive plan was finally complete. But I wouldn't stop there. Not until I had utterly and completely destroyed both Caleb and Jenna, leaving them as empty husks. They would know the soul-crushing pain of utter betrayal, and I would savor every agonizing second of it. The next few months were a whirlwind as I solidified my control over Caleb's decimated company and assets. True to his word, he signed over the deed to the house and all remaining property, leaving himself with nothing. I took a perverse pleasure in watching him slink around like a whipped dog, forced to move into a grungy apartment and take whatever construction labor jobs he could find. The mighty businessman brought to his knees by the wife he had so callously betrayed. As for Jenna, she had indeed slunk away into the shadows once Caleb's money ran out. I couldn't help but revel in the thought of my traitorous sister living in squalor, having tasted the high life only to have it torn away. Maybe now she'd think twice before trying to steal another woman's husband. With my laser focus and legal expertise, I was able to streamline and rebuild the construction company into a highly profitable, ethically run operation. Contracts were renegotiated, shady practices eliminated, and I brought in a trusted team to oversee day-to-day management. Watching the business thrive again under my guidance was deeply satisfying. This was my vengeance made whole, taking everything Caleb had worked for and making it better, stronger, more successful than he ever could, all while he scraped by on menial labor wages. A small part of me knew I should feel sated, that I had gotten the ultimate revenge for his unforgivable betrayal. But there was still that lingering ember of resentment, that urge to keep twisting the knife until he and Jenna were left as empty, debased shells. My chance came a few months later, when there was a loud pounding on my door one evening. I opened it to find Caleb disheveled and wild-eyed on my front step. "You've got to help me," he rasped urgently. "It's Jenna. She's in trouble." Despite my distaste, I felt a prickle of concern. "What kind of trouble?" He ran a shaky hand through his lank hair. "She's been crashing on my buddy's couch, trying to hustle drinks at this skeezy bar, racking up debt with the wrong people, if you know what I mean." My jaw clenched as I realized he was insinuating Jenna had turned to prostitution and petty crime to keep a roof over her head. As much as she had betrayed me, she was still my baby sister. "And you want what exactly?" I asked coolly. "For me to save the day with money? After everything?" Caleb swallowed hard, his bravado seeming to deflate. "Please, Vivian, I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but she's in deep. I can't let anything happen to her." I stared at him for a long moment, feeling a flicker of the man I had once loved beneath the broken, desperate exterior. As much as he had hurt me, some part of him still cared for Jenna, still wanted to protect her. With a heavy sigh, I turned and retrieved my purse, pulling out a wad of cash. "Here," I said gruffly, pressing it into his palm. "Get her out of whatever hellhole she's in and back on her feet. But that's it. I'm not getting involved further than that." Caleb's eyes widened as he clutched the money. "Viv, thank you. You don't know what this means." I held up a hand to cut him off. "Don't thank me. Just take the money and go before I change my mind." He gave a jerky nod, something like shame flickering across his features before he turned and hurried away into the night. I watched him go, feeling a strange sense of melancholy amid the satisfaction. My revenge was complete. I had taken everything from the two people who betrayed me most, leaving them penniless and alone. So why did this victory feel so hollow? The tension hung thick in the air as I took my usual seat at the worn oak table, steeling myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. Ronan's cold, distant gaze never wavered as he folded his hands on the scarred tabletop, the setting sun filtering through the kitchen window, casting an eerie glow on his features. "Alara, we need to talk," he began, his voice carefully measured, devoid of any warmth or emotion. My stomach churned with dread, but I remained silent, waiting for the inevitable. I'm leaving you," Ronan said, the words cutting through the oppressive silence like a knife. I stared at him, stunned, as his next words shattered the fragile veneer of our marriage. "I'm in love with someone else. Celeste. She's pregnant, and we're going to start a new life together." The air left my lungs in a rush, and I gripped the edge of the table, knuckles turning white. Ronan, my husband of 10 years, the man I had built a life with, was abandoning me. For her. A woman young enough to be his daughter, who had wormed her way into our lives under the guise of a perfect, doting partner. "How could you do this to me?" The words escaped my lips in a hoarse whisper, laced with a mixture of disbelief and anguish. "After everything I've sacrificed for you, for your mother." Ronan's eyes narrowed, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features. "Don't make this about you, Alara. This is about my happiness, something I haven't had in a very long time, thanks to you." I recoiled as if he had struck me, the pain of his callous words searing through my chest. "Your happiness?" I spat, my voice rising with each word. "What about my happiness? What about the life we built together?" Ronan scoffed, shaking his head. "That life was nothing but a burden. You constantly nagged me about our finances, about starting a family. I couldn't take it anymore. Celeste understands me in a way you never did." Margot, who had been quietly observing from the doorway, stepped forward, her frail frame trembling with barely contained fury. "How dare you, Ronan? Alara has devoted herself to this family, to caring for you and me. And this is how you repay her?" Ronan's jaw tightened, his gaze flickering to his mother, a spark of defiance in his eyes. "Stay out of this, Mother. This is between Alara and me." "No, Ronan," I interjected, my voice steady despite the maelstrom of emotions raging within me. "This affects all of us. How could you do this? How could you just throw everything away?" Ronan's lips curled into a cold, humorless smile. "Because I can. Because I'm done. I'm leaving, Alara, and there's nothing you can do to stop me." With those final words, he rose from his chair and strode out of the kitchen, leaving me and Margot in stunned silence. I stared at the empty doorway, my mind racing, the weight of his betrayal threatening to crush me. But even as the tears threatened to spill, I knew one thing with certainty. I would not go down without a fight. The minutes after Ronan's bombshell announcement felt like an eternity. Margot and I sat in stunned silence, the air thick with a mix of anger, betrayal, and disbelief. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. But in the midst of the chaos, a spark of determination ignited within me. "We can't just let him do this," I said, turning to Margot, my voice laced with resolve. "There has to be something we can do." Margot's eyes narrowed, a glimmer of steel in her gaze. "Oh, there is, my dear. That boy has always been reckless, thinking he can get away with anything, but this time he's gone too far." I watched as Margot's fingers tightened around the armrest of her chair, her knuckles turning white. I always knew that Celeste was trouble, the way she wormed her way into our lives, acting all sweet and innocent, but I saw right through her facade. "What do you mean?" I asked, leaning forward. That Margot let out a weary sigh. There were little things, little clues that didn't add up. The way she would always steer the conversation away from her past, the expensive gifts she would lavish on Ronan. I had my suspicions, but I never imagined it would come to this. I felt a surge of hope. If Margot had noticed something off about Celeste, maybe there was a way to uncover the truth and use it against Ronan and his mistress. "We need to dig deeper," I said, determination etching itself into my features. "I won't let him do this to us, to me. Not without a fight." Margot nodded, a grim expression settling on her face. "Then that's exactly what we'll do. I may be old, but I still have a few tricks up my sleeve." Over the next few days, Margot and I set to work, scouring through every piece of information we could find on Celeste. We combed through her social media profiles, her financial records, anything that might give us a clue about her true nature. And then, just as we were about to give up, we stumbled upon a bombshell. "Alara, look at this," Margot said, her voice trembling with a mix of shock and triumph. She thrust a stack of papers into my hands, and as I pored over the documents, I felt my breath catch in my throat. "This can't be real," I whispered, my fingers trembling. "Celeste she's involved with a criminal organization?" Margot nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. "It seems our dear Ronan has gotten himself tangled up with some very dangerous people, and if we play our cards right, we can use this to our advantage." I looked up at Margot, a flicker of hope igniting in my chest. "You mean we can get back at them? Make them pay for what they've done?" Margot's lips curled into a grim smile. "Exactly, my dear. And I know just the person who can help us." With that, she reached for the phone, her fingers dancing across the keypad. I watched, a sense of anticipation and trepidation building within me. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. Ronan and Celeste would not get away with this. Not if I had anything to say about it. The phone call Margot made that day proved to be a turning point in our quest for justice. Within a matter of hours, a well-dressed, nondescript man named Everett arrived at our doorstep, his sharp eyes scanning the room with a calculating gaze. "So you've got a problem with your son-in-law and his girlfriend, Everett said, his deep voice carrying a hint of amusement. "Sounds like you ladies could use a little professional help." Margot wasted no time in laying out the details, her voice laced with barely contained fury. "That scoundrel has betrayed my daughter, drained our savings, and is now running off with some harlot who's involved with a criminal organization. We want him to pay for what he's done." Everett's eyebrows rose slightly, and he turned his gaze to me. "And what about you, Miss Alara? Are you ready to play hardball?" I met his stare with unwavering determination. "I am. Ronan has taken everything from me. My marriage, my financial security, my future. I want him to pay for his deceit, and I want Celeste to go down with him." Everett's lips curled into a slight smile. "Good, then let's get to work." Over the next few weeks, Everett proved to be a formidable ally. With his connections and expertise, he swiftly uncovered the truth about Celeste, her involvement with a notorious criminal syndicate, her elaborate web of lies and manipulation. "This Celeste woman is no ordinary mistress," Everett said, his eyes narrowing as he pored over the documentation. She's using Ronan as a pawn, siphoning his resources to fund her organization's nefarious activities. Margot let out a harsh laugh. I knew that little viper was up to no good, and Ronan the fool has fallen right into her trap. I felt a grim sense of satisfaction at the revelation. So, what do we do now? How do we bring them down? Everett's gaze hardened. We take them out, one piece at a time. First, we need to expose Celeste's true nature to Ronan, shatter the illusion he's living in. Then we start chipping away at his career and finances until he has nothing left. Margot leaned forward, her eyes glinting with determination. And what about Celeste's criminal connections? Surely we can use that against her. Everett nodded. Absolutely. I have a few ideas on how we can disrupt her organization's operations, sow discord among her partners. That should make her very, very uncomfortable. As Everett outlined his plan, I felt a surge of anticipation. Ronan and Celeste had underestimated us, thinking they could get away with their betrayal. But they were wrong. We had the upper hand now, and I was more than ready to use it. Let's do it, I said, my voice firm. I want them to pay for what they've done. I want them to feel the same pain and humiliation that they've inflicted on me. Everett's smile widened. Then let's get to work, ladies. This is going to be a wild ride. With that, we dove headfirst into our carefully crafted scheme, determined to bring Ronan and Celeste's world crashing down around them. I may have been the victim, but now I was the one holding all the cards. The evidence Everett had uncovered was a powerful weapon, and we wasted no time in putting it to use. With a newfound sense of purpose, Margot and I confronted Ronan, ready to unleash the full force of our carefully orchestrated plan. Ronan's face twisted into a sneer as I laid out the damning details before him. You think a few papers are going to scare me, Alara? I hold all the cards here. Celeste and I are going to start a new life together, and there's nothing you can do to stop us. I felt a surge of anger at his arrogance, his blatant disregard for the pain he had caused. Oh, Ronan, you have no idea what you're up against, I said, my voice dripping with cold fury. Celeste isn't who you think she is. She's been using you, siphoning your resources to fund her criminal activities. Ronan's eyes widened briefly, but his expression quickly hardened. You're lying. Celeste loves me, and she would never do something like that. Wake up, Ronan, Margot interjected, her frail frame trembling with barely contained rage. Your precious Celeste is nothing more than a snake in the grass, and you're the one who's been fooled. Ronan's jaw tightened, and he leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. You two are grasping at straws. Celeste and I are going to be together, and there's nothing you can do about it. I met his gaze unflinchingly, a steely determination burning in my chest. Oh, we can do plenty, Ronan, and we will. You've taken everything from me. My marriage, my financial security, my future. Now, it's time for you to pay. Ronan scoffed, shaking his head. You're delusional, Alara. You think you can just waltz in and ruin my life? I hold all the power here. Celeste and I are going to live happily ever after, and there's nothing you can do to stop us. I felt a surge of disgust at his arrogance, his complete disregard for the pain he had caused. You're wrong, Ronan. We have the evidence to expose Celeste's true nature, and we're going to use it to bring you both down. Ronan's expression darkened, and he leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming against the table. Go ahead, Alara. Do your worst, but I promise you, you'll regret it. With that, he stood and strode out of the room, leaving Margot and me in stunned silence. But as the door slammed shut behind him, I felt a newfound determination settle in my bones. Well, Alara, Margot said, her voice laced with a hint of pride, it seems we've struck a nerve. I nodded, a grim smile tugging at the corners of my lips. Yes, we have, and now it's time to put our plan into action. Over the next few weeks, Margot and I, with Everett's guidance, set our plan in motion. We meticulously dismantled Ronan's carefully constructed facade, exposing his affair and financial misdeeds to his employer, leading to his dismissal. We used social engineering to sow discord between Ronan and Celeste, planting seeds of doubt that slowly eroded their relationship. And all the while, Ronan remained unaware of the full scope of our plan, his arrogance blinding him to the impending doom that was about to descend upon him. As the weeks passed, I watched with a grim satisfaction as Ronan's carefully constructed world began to crumble around him. With Everett's guidance and Margot's unwavering support, I systematically dismantled every aspect of Ronan's life, leaving him desperate and powerless. First, I targeted his career. Using information from the private investigator, I meticulously laid out the evidence of Ronan's financial misdeeds and his affair with Celeste to his employer. Within days, he was summoned to a meeting and unceremoniously fired, his reputation in shambles. The look of utter disbelief on Ronan's face when he returned home, his briefcase clutched tightly in his hand, was almost enough to make me feel remorse. But then I remembered the anguish he had inflicted on me, the way he had so callously discarded our marriage, and any pity I might have felt dissipated. "What is the meaning of this, Alara?" he demanded, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. "How dare you meddle in my professional life?" I met his gaze unflinchingly, my expression cold and impassive. "I told you, Ronan, you've taken everything from me, and now it's time for you to pay." Margot, who had been silently observing from the corner, spoke up, her voice laced with venom. "You have no one to blame but yourself, you foolish boy. Your greed and your selfishness have brought this upon you." Ronan's eyes darted between us, his face flushed with rage. "This isn't over, Alara. Celeste and I will find a way to start a new life, and you won't be able to stop us." I laughed, the sound devoid of any warmth. "Oh, Ronan, you still don't understand, do you? Celeste is not who you think she is. She's been using you all along, draining your resources to fund her own criminal activities." The color drained from Ronan's face, and for a moment I saw a flicker of doubt cross his features. "No, that can't be true. Celeste loves me. She would never—" "Open your eyes, Ronan," Margot interjected, her frail frame shaking with barely contained fury. "That woman is a snake, and she's been playing you for a fool. And now you're about to lose everything because of your own arrogance and stupidity." Ronan's expression darkened, and he took a step towards us, his fists clenched at his sides. "I won't let you ruin this for me, Alara. Celeste and I are going to be together, no matter what it takes." "Oh, but you already have, Ronan," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You see, we've been working with a private investigator, and he's uncovered the truth about Celeste's involvement with a notorious criminal network." Ronan's eyes widened, and for a moment he seemed to lose his footing, the realization of his mistake dawning on him. "You're lying. Celeste would never—" "Believe it, Ronan," I interrupted, my tone unyielding. "Celeste is nothing more than a con artist, and you've been her pawn all along. And now it's time for you to face the consequences of your actions." With that, I turned on my heel and left the room, Margot following close behind. As we walked away, I could feel Ronan's eyes burning into my back, the weight of his rapidly crumbling world bearing down on him. It was a small victory, but it was only the beginning. I knew that Ronan and Celeste wouldn't go down without a fight, and I was more than ready to meet them head-on. This was a game of cat and mouse, and I was determined to emerge victorious. As the weeks passed, Ronan's world continued to crumble around him. The revelations about Celeste's criminal connections and his own misdeeds had a devastating impact, shattering the carefully constructed facade he had built. I watched with a mix of satisfaction and pity as Ronan's life unraveled. He lost his job, his reputation tarnished beyond repair. Celeste, once the object of his affection, turned on him, abandoning him in his darkest hour. The day Ronan finally realized the full extent of his downfall was etched into my memory. I'll never forget the look of utter despair on his face as he stood before us, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "This can't be happening," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Celeste, she's betrayed me. Everything I've worked for, everything I've sacrificed, it's all gone." Margot, her frail frame belying the steely resolve in her eyes, stepped forward, her expression unforgiving. "That's what you get, Ronan, for your greed and your selfishness. You deserve every bit of this punishment." Ronan's gaze snapped to his mother, a flicker of defiance igniting in his eyes. "How dare you, Mother? This is all your fault and Alara's. If you two hadn't meddled in my life, I'd be happy right now, with Celeste and our child." I felt a surge of anger at his words, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. "Your happiness? What about my happiness, Ronan? What about the life we built together? You threw it all away without a second thought." Ronan scoffed, shaking his head. "You were never enough for me, Alara. Celeste understood me in a way you never could. She saw my potential, my ambition. You were just a burden, holding me back. The words felt like a physical blow, and I had to fight the urge to lash out at him. But before I could respond, Margot stepped in, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. How dare you, you ungrateful boy. Alara has sacrificed everything for this family, for you. And this is how you repay her? With lies and betrayal? Ronan's expression hardened, and he took a step towards Margot, his voice laced with venom. Stay out of this, mother. This is between Alara and me. No, Ronan, I interjected, my voice steady despite the maelstrom of emotions raging within me. This affects all of us. Your actions have consequences, and now you're going to face them. Ronan's eyes widened as I produced a small recording device, the display flashing with the timestamp of our previous confrontation. What is this? Insurance, I said, my lips curling into a grim smile. You see, Ronan, I knew you wouldn't go down without a fight, so I made sure to document everything, including your confession of infidelity and your admission of financial crimes. Ronan's face drained of color, and he took a step back, his hands trembling. You can't do this. That recording is inadmissible, and you have no proof of my wrongdoings. I shook my head, my expression unyielding. Oh, but we do, Ronan. Everett has been working tirelessly to uncover the truth, and he's compiled a mountain of evidence against you and your precious Celeste. Ronan's eyes darted between Margot and me, his usual bravado crumbling in the face of our unwavering resolve. This can't be happening, he whispered, his voice laced with despair. But it is, Ronan, I said, my tone laced with a sense of finality. And now it's time for you to face the consequences of your actions. With those words, I turned and walked away, leaving Ronan to confront the grim reality of his shattered dreams. As I did so, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction, not out of cruelty, but from the knowledge that justice was finally being served. As Ronan's world crumbled around him, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction wash over me. The evidence we had gathered, meticulously compiled by Everett, had proven to be our trump card. I watched as Ronan's arrogance and self-assurance melted away, replaced by a growing desperation. He stood before us, his face a mask of disbelief and fury, as I revealed the full extent of my plan. This can't be happening, he stammered, his eyes darting between Margot and me. You can't do this to me. I won't let you ruin everything I've worked for. I felt a surge of vindication at his words, knowing that the tables had finally turned. Oh, but we can, Ronan. And we will. You see, we have recordings of our previous confrontations, where you've openly confessed to your infidelity and financial misdeeds. Ronan's face drained of color, and he took a step back, his hands trembling. No, that's impossible. You couldn't have. I held up a hand, silencing him. But we did, Ronan. And that's not all. Everett has uncovered a wealth of evidence linking you and Celeste to a vast network of criminal activities. Margot stepped forward, her eyes narrowed in contempt. You thought you could get away with your betrayal, didn't you, boy? Well, now you're going to pay for your sins, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Ronan's expression twisted with anguish and rage. You're lying. Celeste would never betray me like this. She loves me. She needs me. I shook my head, my voice laced with a sense of pity. I'm afraid that's not the case, Ronan. Celeste has been using you all along, draining your resources to fund her own criminal ventures. She never cared about you, only about what you could provide for her. Ronan's knees buckled, and he sank into a nearby chair, his head in his hands. No, he muttered, the words barely audible. This can't be happening. My life, my future, everything I've worked for. I watched him, my heart hardening against the sight of his despair. After everything he had done to me, to us, I felt no remorse for the consequences he now faced. It's over, Ronan, I said, my voice firm. You're going to be held accountable for your actions, both legally and financially, and Celeste will face the consequences of her crimes as well. Ronan looked up, his eyes wild with desperation. Please, Alara, you have to help me. I'll do anything, just make this go away. I can't lose everything, I can't. I held up a hand, silencing him. It's too late for that, Ronan. You made your choice, and now you have to live with the consequences. Margot and I, we're moving on. We're going to start a new life, one without you in it. Ronan opened his mouth, but no words came out. He sat there, utterly defeated, as the reality of his downfall sank in. I turned to Margot, a small, sad smile on my lips. Come on, Mother, let's go. We have a future to build. As Margot and I walked away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. Ronan had betrayed me, but in the end, justice had prevailed. And now, with the remaining assets from our marriage, Margot and I could start anew, free from the shadow of his deceit. As Ronan's world crumbled around him, Margot and I wasted no time in moving on with our lives. With the remainder of our assets, we were able to secure a comfortable new home in a quiet, suburban neighborhood, a fresh start away from the pain and betrayal we had endured. I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief as we settled into our new surroundings, the weight of the past few months slowly lifting from my shoulders. Margot, too, seemed to thrive in our new environment, her mobility issues improving as she engaged with the local community. It's amazing how much better I feel being out of that old house, Margot said one evening as we sat together on our patio, the setting sun casting a warm glow across the well-manicured lawn. That place held so many memories, both good and bad. Now it's like we can breathe again. I nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of my lips. I know what you mean, Mother. It's been a long and difficult journey, but I'm grateful we have this chance to start anew. Margot reached out and squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and affection. And I'm grateful to have you, my dear. You've been through so much, and yet you've come out of it stronger than ever. I felt a surge of emotion at her words, and I blinked back the tears that threatened to fall. I couldn't have done it without you, Margot. Your support, your unwavering belief in me, it's what kept me going. Margot chuckled, her expression softening. Nonsense, my dear. You are the one who took charge, who fought back against that despicable son of mine. I may have provided a listening ear and a shoulder to lean on, but you were the one who orchestrated his downfall. I nodded, a sense of pride swelling in my chest. It wasn't easy, but I knew I had to do it. Ronan took so much from me, from us. I couldn't just let him walk away and start a new life, not after everything he's done. Margot's expression sobered, and she squeezed my hand again. You're right, Alara. Ronan deserved every bit of what he got, and I'm glad to see that he's finally facing the consequences of his actions. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon. It was a peaceful scene, a far cry from the turmoil we had experienced just a few months ago. You know, I said, breaking the silence, I think I'm ready to start focusing on my own future again. I've spent so long taking care of others, it's time I started taking care of myself. Margot smiled, her eyes sparkling with a newfound energy. I couldn't agree more, my dear, and I'm more than happy to lend a hand. After all, we're in this together, now and always. With that, we rose from our seats and headed inside, the warmth of the evening air enveloping us. As I walked through the halls of our new home, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope and optimism for the future. Ronan's betrayal had shattered my world, but with Margot by my side, I was ready to rebuild it, brick by brick. This was a new chapter, one filled with the promise of redemption and the pursuit of happiness. And as I looked to the road ahead, I knew that whatever challenges lay in wait, I was more than ready to face them head on. You think you can just waltz back into our lives with empty promises and a guilty conscience? The words spilled out of my mouth before I could stop them, my voice laced with years of pent-up resentment. I watched as my husband Declan flinched at my accusation, his carefully crafted facade cracking ever so slightly. For a moment, the man I'd once loved stood before me, exposed and vulnerable, a stark contrast to the charming, successful marketing executive he portrayed to the world. Thea, please, let me explain, he pleaded, his eyes darting around our modest suburban home, as if searching for an escape. I crossed my arms, steeling myself against the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Explain what, Declan? That you've been lying to me all this time? That you've been leading a double life? The words hung in the air, the weight of their truth bearing down on us both. I couldn't help but wonder how long this had been going on, how many times Declan had betrayed my trust. My gaze drifted to our son Finn, who stood silently by my side, his hazel eyes narrowed with a wisdom and maturity far beyond his 15 years. The pain and confusion etched on his face made my heart clench. This wasn't how it was supposed to be, our little family, torn apart by Declan's selfish actions. "Mom, what's going on?" Finn asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What is he talking about?" I hesitated, not wanting to burden my son with the ugliness of his father's transgressions. But Finn deserved to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. "Your father has been—" I paused, struggling to find the right words. "He's been keeping secrets from us, Finn. Secrets that are going to change our lives, whether we're ready or not." Declan took a step forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Thea, please, let's not involve Finn in this. This is between you and me." I let out a humorless laugh. "Between you and me? Don't you think Finn has a right to know what kind of man you really are?" I turned to my son, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Finn, your father has been having an affair. He's been living a double life, betraying our family." Finn's eyes widened, his expression a mix of shock and betrayal. "An affair? But how could you, Dad?" He shook his head, his voice trembling with emotion. "How could you do this to us?" Declan opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. For once, the silver-tongued charmer was at a loss for words. I took a step closer to Finn, wrapping my arm around him protectively. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Finn, but I promise you we're going to get through this, together." Finn nodded, his jaw set with a determination that belied his age. "What are we going to do, Mom?" I took a deep breath, my gaze unwavering as I stared down my husband. "We're going to fight. Declan's betrayal isn't just about me. It's about our family, our future, and I won't let him destroy everything we've built without a fight." Declan opened his mouth, but I raised my hand, silencing him. "Save it, Declan. The time for excuses and empty promises is over. Now it's time for you to face the consequences of your actions." The air was thick with tension as we stood there, 3 lives irrevocably changed by the unraveling of Declan's web of lies. But in that moment, I knew that Finn and I would emerge stronger, our bond forged in the crucible of adversity. This was our fight, and we were ready to win. The next few days were a blur of fury and determination. After Declan's botched attempt to smooth things over, I knew I couldn't trust him anymore. There was only one thing left to do: uncover the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. So, with Finn's help, I started digging. We followed Declan's movements, tracking his comings and goings, piecing together the fragments of his double life. It wasn't long before we stumbled upon a clue that would change everything. One evening, as Declan was leaving for another late night at the office, Finn and I decided to follow him. We trailed his car through the city streets, our hearts pounding in anticipation and dread. Finally, Declan pulled into an upscale apartment complex, one I didn't recognize. "This is it, Mom," Finn whispered, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Let's see what he's hiding." We waited, hidden in the shadows, as Declan let himself into the building. Minutes later, a young woman emerged, her blonde hair and designer clothes a stark contrast to the modest suburban housewife I had become. "Who is she?" Finn asked, his voice laced with anger. I shook my head, my own fury building. "I don't know, but I intend to find out." We watched as the woman entered Declan's car, and the two of them drove off together. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. Betrayal, rage, and a twinge of heartbreak swirled within me, each emotion fueling my determination to uncover the full extent of Declan's deception. "We need to get inside that apartment," I said, my gaze locked on the building. Finn nodded, already unbuckling his seatbelt. "I'm with you, Mom." We made our way to the apartment, and with a bit of lock-picking skill that Finn had picked up from a friend, we were inside. The place was immaculate, clearly maintained by someone with Declan's refined tastes. But it was the personal touches that made my blood boil. Framed photos of the woman, her belongings scattered throughout the space. "He's been living a double life," I murmured, the reality of the situation sinking in. "All this time, he's been deceiving us, betraying our family." Finn's jaw was clenched, his eyes burning with a righteous fury. "What are we going to do, Mom?" I took a deep breath, my mind racing with possibilities. "We're going to expose him, Finn. We're going to bring his whole world crashing down around him." "How?" Finn asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. I turned to him, a grim determination etched on my face. "We're going to plant the seeds of his downfall. We're going to use his own deceit against him, and we're going to make sure he pays for what he's done." Finn nodded, his expression mirroring my own. "I'm with you, Mom, whatever it takes." We left the apartment. The evidence of Declan's infidelity burned into our minds. The drive home was silent, the weight of our newfound knowledge heavy upon our shoulders. But I knew that this was only the beginning. Declan's betrayal would not go unanswered, and I would stop at nothing to ensure that he faced the consequences of his actions. As we pulled into our driveway, I turned to Finn, my eyes meeting his. "Get ready, Finn. The storm is coming, and we're going to be the ones to weather it." The walls of our home seemed to close in on me as Finn and I returned from our investigation. The reality of Declan's betrayal weighed heavily, a dark cloud that threatened to consume us both. Finn was the first to break the silence. "Mom, what are we going to do?" I could hear the trepidation in his voice, the fear that his family was falling apart. He was just a child, yet he was forced to grapple with the ugly truth of his father's deception. "We're going to fight back," I said, my own voice steady and resolute. "Declan needs to be held accountable for what he's done." Finn's eyes widened, a flicker of hope sparking within them. "How? What's the plan?" I paused, weighing my words carefully. "We're going to use his own lies against him. We're going to expose his affair and the embezzlement at his company." Finn's brow furrowed. "Embezzlement? You think he's been stealing from his company?" I nodded grimly. "It's the only explanation for the lavish apartment and the way he's been living. Declan's always been good with numbers, and it wouldn't be hard for him to siphon off funds." Finn's expression shifted, the innocence of youth replaced by a steely determination. "Okay, what do we do?" I placed a hand on his shoulder, meeting his gaze. "Finn, this isn't going to be easy. What we're about to do could have serious consequences. Are you sure you're ready for this?" He didn't hesitate. "I'm with you, Mom, whatever it takes." I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride at his unwavering loyalty. Declan had betrayed us, but Finn and I would stand united, no matter the cost. "All right, here's what we're going to do." Over the next few days, Finn and I worked tirelessly, piecing together the evidence against Declan. We scoured his financial records, meticulously documenting the discrepancies and misappropriated funds. Alongside that, we set the stage for exposing his affair, planting breadcrumbs that would lead directly to his mistress. It was a delicate dance, one that required patience and precision. Finn proved to be an invaluable partner, his sharp mind and keen observation skills complementing my own. Together, we wove a web of deceit that would ensnare Declan, leaving him no choice but to face the consequences of his actions. As the final pieces fell into place, Finn and I stood in our living room, surveying the evidence before us. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" Finn asked, his eyes reflecting the weight of what we were about to do. I nodded, my resolve unwavering. Declan needs to pay for what he's done. This is the only way to ensure our family's future. Finn took a deep breath and then squared his shoulders. "Okay, let's do this." With a few clicks of the mouse, the incriminating information was sent out into the world. Anonymous tips that would unleash the storm upon Declan's carefully constructed facade. In the quiet that followed, Finn and I stood together, our hands clasped tightly. We had taken the first step, and now the dominoes were set to fall. Whatever happened next, we would face it as a united front, mother and son, determined to reclaim our lives from the ashes of Declan's betrayal. The days that followed were filled with a tense anticipation, as Finn and I waited for the dominoes to fall. We knew that it was only a matter of time before Declan's world came crashing down around him, and we were both equal parts terrified and resolute. The first signs of the impending chaos came when Declan started acting strangely. He was distracted, his usual charm and confidence replaced by an underlying anxiety. I watched him, feigning ignorance as he made frantic phone calls and retreated to his study for hours on end. "Something's wrong," Finn whispered one evening as we sat in the living room pretending to watch TV. "Do you think he knows?" I placed a comforting hand on his arm. "If he does, he hasn't confronted us yet, but we need to be prepared for when he does." Finn nodded, his brow furrowed in concentration. "What's the next step?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. We need to plant the final piece of evidence, something that will irrevocably link Declan to the embezzlement and his affair. Finn's eyes widened, but he didn't flinch. "What do you have in mind?" "I've set up a false paper trail," I explained, my voice low and steady. documents that will implicate Declan in the embezzlement, with his mistress as the motive. Finn's expression shifted, a glimmer of unease crossing his features. Mom, are you sure about this? I mean, we're essentially framing him. I reached out and squeezed his hand, my gaze unwavering. I know, Finn, but Declan has left us no choice. He destroyed our family, and now he has to face the consequences. Finn nodded, his jaw set with determination. Okay, let's do it. Together, we carefully planted the evidence, ensuring that it would be discovered at the most opportune moment. As we finished, a sense of finality settled over us, the weight of our actions palpable. It's done, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Finn looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resolve. What now? I pulled him into a tight hug, my own emotions threatening to spill over. Now we wait, and when the time is right, we'll be there to watch Declan fall. The next few days were a blur of tension and anxiety. Declan's behavior grew more erratic, and I could see the strain taking its toll on him. Finn and I kept our heads down, acting as if nothing was amiss, but the anticipation was palpable. Then, the moment we had been waiting for arrived. Declan burst through the front door, his face contorted with rage and panic. "What the hell have you done?" he shouted, his eyes wild. I stood my ground, my expression calm and collected. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Declan." "Don't give me that crap, Thea," he spat, his hands trembling. "I know you're behind this. The company is investigating me, and they've found evidence of embezzlement, and—" He trailed off, the color draining from his face as he realized the full extent of his downfall. "And your affair," I finished, my voice laced with a quiet triumph. "Looks like the walls are closing in, Declan." Declan stared at me, his mouth agape, unable to form a coherent response. In that moment, I saw the man I had once loved for who he truly was, a coward, a liar, and a betrayer. Finn stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "You brought this on yourself, Dad. Now you have to face the consequences." Declan opened his mouth, but no words came out. He turned and fled, the sound of his footsteps echoing through the house, a fitting symphony to the crumbling of his carefully constructed life. As the door slammed shut, Finn and I stood together, our eyes meeting in a silent understanding. The first phase of our plan was complete, and now the final act was about to unfold. The days that followed Declan's confrontation were charged with a tense and uneasy silence. Finn and I knew that the final act was about to unfold, and we steeled ourselves for the inevitable fallout. Declan, for his part, had become a shadow of his former self. Gone was the confident, charismatic man I had once loved. In his place was a desperate, cowering figure, constantly looking over his shoulder. I could see the fear in his eyes, the realization that his carefully constructed world was crumbling around him. One evening, as Finn and I sat in the living room, the sound of Declan's car pulling into the driveway sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I turned to Finn, my gaze unwavering. "It's time," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Finn nodded, his expression resolute. We moved to the front window, watching as Declan hurried up the path, his movements frantic and erratic. The front door burst open, and Declan stumbled inside, his eyes wild and his face twisted with anguish. "Thea! Finn!" he cried, his voice cracking with desperation. "What have you done?" I stepped forward, my arms crossed over my chest. "What are you talking about, Declan?" "Don't play dumb with me," he shouted, spittle flying from his lips. "The company knows about the embezzlement. They know about Elise." Finn tensed beside me, his jaw clenched tight. "So your little affair has finally caught up with you, huh, Dad?" Declan's gaze snapped to our son, his eyes wild with a mixture of fear and fury. "You two? You did this, didn't you? How could you?" I held up a hand, silencing him. "We did what we had to do, Declan. You brought this on yourself." "But I'm your husband," he bellowed, his voice echoing through the house. "How could you do this to me?" "You lost the right to be our husband and father the moment you betrayed us," I said, my voice steady and unwavering. "You destroyed our family, Declan. Now you have to face the consequences." Declan's knees buckled, and he collapsed to the floor, his head cradled in his hands. "Please, Thea, Finn, you have to help me. I can't lose everything." Finn stepped forward, his expression hardening. "You should have thought about that before you started lying and cheating. Now it's too late." Declan looked up at us, his eyes pleading. "I'll do anything. Please, just help me." I shook my head, my heart hardening against the man I once loved. It's too late for that, Declan. The die has been cast. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway made us all freeze. Declan's face paled, and he scrambled to his feet, his eyes darting around the room in a desperate search for an escape. "That's her," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Elise." I watched as the front door opened, and a young woman stepped inside, her expression a mixture of confusion and concern. "Declan, what's going on?" she asked, her gaze sweeping over the scene before her. Declan moved towards her, his hands outstretched. "Elise, you have to help me. Thea and Finn, they've—" But before he could finish, a barrage of text messages and emails began to flood Elise's phone. She looked down, her eyes widening as she read the messages, her expression shifting from confusion to fury. "Declan, what is this?" she demanded, her voice rising in pitch. "Embezzlement? Affair?" Declan's face crumpled, and he reached for her, but Elise recoiled, slapping him across the face. "You lied to me," she spat, her eyes brimming with tears. "All this time you were using me." Declan cowered, his once proud demeanor shattered. "Elise, please, I can explain." But Elise was already turning towards the door, her steps quickening with each passing moment. "It's over, Declan," she called out, her voice thick with disgust. "I want nothing to do with you." And with that, she was gone, leaving Declan alone, his world collapsing around him. Finn and I watched, our expressions stoic, as the final dominoes fell, and Declan's reckoning had arrived. The fallout from Declan's downfall was swift and unforgiving. In the days following the confrontation at our home, the evidence we had so meticulously planted began to surface, sending shockwaves through his company and personal life. Finn and I watched with a mixture of triumph and unease as the revelations unfolded. Declan's embezzlement scheme had been uncovered, with a paper trail leading directly back to him. His affair with the younger colleague Elise had also been exposed, her angry tirades and accusations splashed across social media for all to see. The company's executives were swift to act, convening an emergency board meeting to discuss the shocking allegations against their star marketing executive. Finn and I positioned ourselves strategically, ensuring we would have a front-row seat to Declan's downfall. As the meeting commenced, the tension in the room was palpable. Declan, once the picture of confidence and control, sat hunched in his chair, his eyes darting around the room in a futile search for a way out. "Mr. Langston," the CEO began, his voice grave, "we've received some disturbing information regarding your conduct at the company. Allegations of embezzlement and an inappropriate relationship with a colleague. Do you have any explanation for these serious charges?" Declan's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. He was trapped, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before our very eyes. I don't know what to say," he stammered, his usual eloquence deserting him. The CEO's expression hardened. "Perhaps you'd like to explain the substantial transfers of company funds into a personal account, or the considerable sums spent on lavish gifts and trips for this colleague of yours." Declan swallowed hard, his face pale and drawn. I can explain. It's not what it seems. I was just trying to." "Save it, Declan," the CEO interrupted, his voice dripping with contempt. "The evidence against you is overwhelming. You've betrayed the trust of this company and your family. As of this moment, you are terminated from your position, and we will be pursuing legal action against you." The room erupted into a cacophony of voices, executives shouting and demanding answers, the sound of Declan's world crashing down around him. Finn gripped my hand, his eyes shining with a mixture of relief and vindication. "It's happening, Mom. He's getting what he deserves." I squeezed his hand, my own expression grim. "Yes, Finn, but this is only the beginning." As the meeting descended into chaos, I scanned the room, searching for any sign of Elise. It wasn't long before I spotted her, her face a mask of fury and betrayal. Declan caught sight of her, his eyes widening in panic. Elise, please, you have to help me. You know I love you. We can—" But Elise cut him off, slapping him hard across the face. "How dare you, Declan? You used me, lied to me, and now you expect me to help you. You're pathetic." Declan recoiled, his hand clutching his reddened cheek. "Elise, please. I can make this right. We can—" "There is no we, Declan," Elise spat, her voice trembling with emotion. "We're done. I want nothing more to do with you or your twisted little family." With that, Elise turned on her heel and stormed out of the room, leaving Declan to face the consequences of his actions alone. As the executives continued to berate and interrogate Declan, Finn and I watched in silence, our plan unfolding flawlessly. The dominoes were falling one by one, and Declan's world was crumbling around him. In that moment, I knew that our long-awaited revenge was at hand. Declan had betrayed us, and now he would pay the price. The echoes of his betrayal would reverberate through his life, a haunting reminder of the consequences of his actions. The days that followed Declan's public downfall were a whirlwind of chaos and upheaval. As the investigation into his embezzlement and affair deepened, the once respected marketing executive found himself stripped of his job, his reputation, and the life he had so carefully crafted. Finn and I watched from the sidelines, our expressions a mix of grim satisfaction and a hint of unease. We had engineered Declan's downfall, but the weight of our actions still lingered, a constant reminder of the difficult choices we had been forced to make. The news of Declan's transgressions spread like wildfire, splashed across headlines and social media. His colleagues, once admirers of his success, now turned on him with a vengeance, their disgust and outrage palpable. The company he had worked for unceremoniously severed all ties, leaving him to face the legal consequences of his actions alone. One afternoon, as Finn and I sat in our living room, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a distraught Elise, her eyes red and puffy from crying. "Thea, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice trembling. I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "Elise, what are you doing here?" She pushed past me, her gaze wild and erratic. "I can't believe this is happening. Declan, he's ruined everything." Finn appeared at my side, his expression wary. "What do you want, Elise?" Elise whirled around, her eyes flashing with a mixture of anger and desperation. "I want to know why you did this. Why did you destroy Declan's life?" I held up a hand, my voice calm and measured. "Elise, Declan brought this upon himself. He betrayed our family, and we had to take action." "But I loved him," Elise cried, her hands clenching into fists. "I thought we had something real. How could he do this to me?" Finn stepped forward, his expression hardening. "Declan was using you, Elise. He's been lying and cheating his whole life. You were just one of his victims." Elise shook her head, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "I can't believe it. All this time I thought he was the one. And now?" She trailed off, a sob escaping her lips. I reached out, placing a hand on her arm. "I'm sorry, Elise. I know this is difficult, but Declan's actions have consequences. You deserve better than him." Elise looked up at me, her eyes glistening with tears. I don't know what to do. My life is in shambles because of him." Finn stepped forward, his voice soft but resolute. "You have to move on, Elise. Declan is going to face the full weight of the law for what he's done. You don't have to be a part of that." Elise nodded, her jaw clenching with determination. "You're right. I can't let him drag me down, too." She turned to the door, pausing for a moment. "Thank you, Thea. Finn, I hope you both can find a way to move on from this, too." With that, she was gone, leaving Finn and I alone once more. We stood in silence, the weight of our actions heavy on our shoulders. "Do you think she'll be okay, Mom?" Finn asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I sighed, pulling him into a tight hug. "I hope so, Finn, but right now we need to focus on rebuilding our own lives." Finn nodded, his arms tightening around me. "What about Dad? What's going to happen to him?" I felt a twinge of regret, but it was quickly overshadowed by a steely resolve. "Declan will have to face the consequences of his actions, Finn. The authorities are already closing in on him. It's time for him to pay for what he's done." Finn's grip on me tightened, and I knew that, despite the difficulty of our situation, we would emerge stronger. Declan's betrayal had shattered our family, but Finn and I would rebuild, stronger and more resilient than ever before. In the aftermath of Declan's downfall, Finn and I found ourselves grappling with a range of emotions: relief, sadness, and a glimmer of hope for a brighter future. The dust had settled, and while the scars of his betrayal remained, we were determined to move forward and reclaim our lives. As the legal proceedings against Declan unfolded, the full extent of his misdeeds became public knowledge. The embezzlement charges were staggering, and his affair with Elise only added to the tarnish on his reputation. Declan, once a respected and influential figure, now found himself shunned by his former colleagues and facing the very real possibility of a lengthy prison sentence. Despite the gravity of the situation, Finn and I took solace in the knowledge that justice was being served. Declan would have to answer for his crimes, and we could finally begin to heal and rebuild our lives without the burden of his lies and deceit. As the weeks turned to months, I found myself reconnecting with old friends and colleagues, my dedication to my nursing career becoming a source of pride and purpose. The promotion I had been working towards for years finally materialized, and I reveled in the validation of my hard work and resilience. Finn, too, blossomed in the absence of Declan's toxic influence. He threw himself into his studies, his grades soaring as he set his sights on prestigious colleges and universities. The light in his eyes had returned, and I could see the weight of the world slowly lifting from his shoulders. One evening, as Finn and I sat in our living room enjoying a rare moment of peace, the doorbell rang. I tensed, half expecting to see Declan on the other side pleading for our forgiveness. But when I opened the door, I was greeted by an unfamiliar face, a stern-looking police officer. "Mrs. Langston?" the officer asked, his voice neutral. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. "Yes, that's me. What can I do for you, officer?" "I'm afraid I have some news regarding your husband, Declan," he said, his expression unreadable. Finn appeared at my side, his eyes filled with trepidation. "What happened?" The officer cleared his throat, his gaze shifting between us. "Mr. Langston has been sentenced to 5 years in prison for his crimes. The embezzlement and affair charges were substantial, and the judge deemed him a flight risk." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, quickly followed by a twinge of sadness. Declan had brought this upon himself, but the finality of his punishment was still a difficult reality to accept. "I see," I said, my voice steady. "Thank you for informing us, officer." The officer nodded, a hint of sympathy in his eyes. "If you have any questions or need assistance, please don't hesitate to contact us." With that, he turned and left, and Finn and I were left alone once more. I placed a hand on his shoulder, meeting his gaze. "It's over, Finn," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Declan's finally going to pay for what he's done." Finn nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I'm glad, Mom. I'm glad we fought back. I'm glad we didn't let him get away with it." I pulled him into a tight hug, a weight lifted from my shoulders. "Me too, Finn. Me too." In the days and weeks that followed, Finn and I continued to rebuild our lives, each day bringing new challenges and opportunities. I secured the promotion I had worked so hard for, and Finn excelled in his studies, his sights set on the future. As we sat together on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a sense of peace and resilience that I hadn't experienced in a long time. Declan's betrayal had shaken us, but it had also forged an unbreakable bond between Finn and me. We had weathered the storm, and now we were stronger for it. "You know, Finn," I said, my gaze fixed on the horizon, "I'm proud of you. Proud of us. We've come a long way, haven't we?" Finn reached over and squeezed my hand, his eyes shining with understanding. "Yeah, Mom, we have, and I'm glad we did it together." In that moment, I knew that our future was bright and that no matter what obstacles lay ahead, Finn and I would face them side by side, our bond stronger than ever before. I stared in disbelief at Olivia, my daughter-in-law, standing over the toilet with my antique diamond earrings dangling from her fingers. Her face drained of color as our eyes met. I was just admiring them," she stammered, her voice trembling. "In my bathroom, with the door closed?" I challenged, my heart pounding. "Those earrings were the last gift from my late husband before cancer took him." Olivia swallowed hard. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." "You're right. You shouldn't have," I snapped, snatching the earrings from her grasp. "How dare you go through my private things?" Her eyes narrowed. "It's not like you even wear them anymore." The callous remark stung. Ever since my son Bryce had married this young woman 2 years ago, I'd noticed a steady progression of disrespect and entitlement from her. At first, she'd seemed so sweet and caring, the perfect girlfriend turned wife for my beloved boy. But lately, her true colors were becoming impossible to ignore. "Mom, what's going on?" Bryce appeared in the hallway, his eyebrows furrowed with concern. Olivia immediately played the victim. "Your mother is overreacting. I was just looking at her jewelry." I shot her a withering look. "She had my earrings and was about to flush them down the toilet." "What?" Bryce's jaw dropped as he turned to Olivia. "Is that true?" She scoffed in feigned indignation. Of course not. Why would I do that? The denial only infuriated me more. Don't lie. I caught you red-handed. Bryce held up his hands, clearly overwhelmed by the confrontation between us. Ever the peacekeeper, just like his father. Okay. Let's all just calm down, he urged. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? After what I'd witnessed? My own son was making excuses for her repetitive, concerning behavior. I took a deep breath, fighting the swell of anger and disappointment. Bryce had always been so kind-hearted, so loyal to family. How could he be so blind to the truth about his wife? Bryce, you need to have a serious talk with your wife about respecting boundaries and people's property, I stated firmly. This has gone too far. Olivia jutted out her chin defiantly. I don't need to be scolded like a child. As the two continued bickering, I clutched the earrings tightly in my fist, wondering just how far Olivia's disrespect would go, and what I'd have to do to make her see the consequences. A few days after the earrings incident, Bryce dropped another bombshell over dinner. Olivia and I are going to move in here for a little while, he announced casually, as if discussing the weather. I nearly choked on my food. Excuse me? You're moving back in? Olivia nodded sweetly. Just until we can get back on our feet financially. How long is a little while? I pressed, my voice tight. The last thing I wanted was that woman living under my roof again. Bryce shrugged. A couple months, tops. My job cut my hours, and Olivia's paycheck barely covers her student loans. Of course, the classic excuse. I bit back a sarcastic remark, forcing a strained smile. Well, I suppose that would be all right, for a short period. 2 months turned into 4, then 6. All the while, Olivia treated my home like a hotel, lounging about and leaving messes everywhere for me to clean up after her. The disrespect was maddening. Don't you have any pride? I finally erupted one morning, gesturing at the pile of dishes and clutter she'd left in the living room. This isn't how I raised your husband. Olivia rolled her eyes. Relax, Francine, I'll get to it later. It's Mrs. Lawrence to you, I snapped. And later isn't good enough. This is my house. She sneered. Well, I'm Bryce's wife. I have as much right to be here as you. The audacity of that comment left me speechless. As much right? I was the homeowner, the one allowing them to stay rent-free out of the goodness of my heart. When Bryce returned home, I wasted no time venting my frustrations. Your wife is being completely disrespectful and lazy, I fumed. If she's not going to follow the house rules, she needs to find other arrangements. To my dismay, Bryce simply made more excuses for her behavior. Come on, Mom. You know how stressed she is with her job situation right now. Cut her some slack. Some slack? I threw up my hands. I'm already doing her a favor letting you both stay here. The least she could do is be a decent house guest. Bryce sighed heavily. Look, we'll try to help out more around here. But you've got to ease up. All this negativity towards Olivia is pushing her away. Pushing her away? The sheer audacity of his words left me stunned, as if I were the one being unreasonable. Over the following weeks, Olivia's entitled, lazy behavior only worsened. She'd lounge around all day while I cleaned up after her messes. Petty arguments became frequent as I struggled to lay down boundaries in my own home. The stress was becoming overwhelming. One evening, I finally reached my breaking point. Gathering the last shreds of my patience, I cornered Bryce in the kitchen. This situation isn't working, I stated bluntly. Olivia has got to go, or I'll be forced to take legal action. Bryce's eyes widened in disbelief. You're going to kick out your own son? Over some household chores? I shook my head, my voice strained. Don't make this about you, Bryce. Your wife is the problem here. She's shown nothing but disrespect in my house. As the argument escalated, Olivia came sauntering in with a smug grin. Having a family meeting without me? She taunted. That insufferable, entitled attitude, something had to give before I lost control completely. But Bryce was too blinded by love to see the truth about his wife's despicable nature. I could feel my control over the situation rapidly slipping away. The tension in the house was becoming unbearable. Olivia's laziness and lack of respect only escalated, while Bryce remained stubbornly blind to her misdeeds. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. One night, Bryce dropped another bombshell during dinner. Olivia and I have decided to stay a while longer, he announced cautiously, at least until we can afford our own place again. I stared at him in disbelief. You're kidding, right? You've been mooching off me for 6 months already. Olivia scowled at my choice of words. We're not mooching. This is difficult for us too, you know. Difficult? I scoffed. All you do is lounge around while I clean up after you. This is my home, not a hotel. Mom, please, Bryce began, using that infuriatingly placating tone. We're just asking for a little more time. Where else are we supposed to go? I opened my mouth to protest, but Olivia swiftly cut me off. Don't be so selfish, Francine. You have more than enough room here. The audacity, after everything I'd sacrificed to let them stay. Selfish? I shot back, my voice rising. I'm the one who's opened her home to you. All I ask is for some basic respect and courtesy in return. Olivia rolled her eyes dramatically. Here we go again with the nagging. That arrogant, dismissive attitude was the final straw. I slammed my fist on the table, making them both jump. That's it. I've bent over backwards trying to be accommodating, but you've become nothing but an ungrateful freeloader, Olivia. I want you out of my house. Bryce immediately came to his wife's defense, as usual. Don't talk to her like that. We'll find somewhere else if that's how you're going to be. Good, I shot back recklessly. At least I'll have some peace and quiet for once. We argued bitterly until Olivia abruptly stormed off in a huff. Bryce shook his head, looking utterly dismayed. This has gotten way out of hand, Mom. If you can't be civil to my wife, maybe it is best we make other arrangements. His words struck me like a physical blow. Was he truly choosing Olivia over his own mother? After everything I'd done for them, the thought crushed me. I suddenly felt very old and alone. I don't want that, Bryce, I managed, struggling to keep my composure. But your wife refuses to show any respect in my own home. I'm at my wit's end here. He sighed heavily. Then I don't know what to tell you. We're stuck in a bad situation, but Olivia is my priority now. I have to stand by her. Hearing him place that vile woman's needs over mine twisted the knife deeper. This was my own son, my flesh and blood, choosing an entitled, lazy freeloader over his own mother. I could no longer hold back the tears. You'd really abandon your own family for her? Bryce looked pained but resolute. I'm not abandoning anyone, Mom. I'm just supporting my wife like any man should. His naive loyalty sickened me. Couldn't he see how terribly Olivia was manipulating and using him? Using us both? As I watched him retreat to the bedroom, I felt a cold sense of dread creep over me. I was quickly losing control of the situation. And something had to be done before that awful woman took complete advantage. I may have been backed into a corner for now, but I refused to be bullied and disrespected any longer, not in my own house. If Olivia wanted a war, then I would give her one she'd never forget. In the days following our blowout argument, an uneasy truce settled over the house. Bryce and Olivia kept to themselves, while I seethed in private over her continued disrespect and laziness. The tension was suffocating. Then one morning, I noticed my diamond tennis bracelet was missing from its usual spot on my dresser. Bryce, I called out, trying to keep the panic from my voice. Have you seen my bracelet anywhere? He poked his head into the bedroom with a quizzical look. No. Why would I have your bracelet? Well, it's gone missing, I replied tersely, and the only other person who's been in my room is Olivia. Bryce's expression hardened at the implied accusation. You're not seriously thinking Olivia took it, are you? Of course not, I lied, struggling to keep my cool. But it wasn't just misplaced. That bracelet was my late husband's last anniversary gift to me. A flicker of concern crossed his face, but he quickly smothered it. Look, I'm sure it'll turn up somewhere. But accusing Olivia of taking it is really messed up, Mom. I opened my mouth to protest, but the sound of the bathroom door opening cut me off. Olivia emerged, her eyes going wide like a deer in headlights when she saw us. Everything okay? She asked in an artificially sweet tone. No, everything is not okay. I snapped before Bryce could respond. My diamond tennis bracelet is missing. The one Dad gave me right before he... My voice caught in my throat as the implication hit me. If Olivia had stooped so low as to take that priceless, sentimental piece of jewelry. Bryce looked utterly bewildered. Olivia wouldn't take your bracelet, Mom. You're overreacting. But I could see the panic flickering in Olivia's eyes as the realization of being cornered set in. Well? I pressed, taking a step towards her. Do you have anything to say for yourself? Her expression hardened. You've already made up your mind about me, haven't you? Why should I even bother defending myself? Because you're accusing my wife of being a thief, Bryce interjected heatedly. Olivia whirled on him. No, Bryce, let her rant. Let her make a fool of herself for once. The sheer audacity of her denial left me stunned. She was such an expert liar and manipulator, so skilled at twisting the narrative to her advantage. You little brat, I seethed, barely able to contain my rage. I know you took it. Your greedy eyes have been all over my jewelry from day one. Bryce quickly stepped between us, playing peacemaker as usual. Enough! This arguing has to stop now. I'll stop when that gold-digging wife of yours stops stealing from me, I shot back recklessly. Olivia's eyes went wide with feigned hurt. How dare you? But I could see the cracks in her facade, the briefest flicker of panic and guilt that told me everything I needed to know. She had taken that bracelet and likely many other valuables over these past months. The realization made my blood boil. Not just disrespect anymore, but outright theft from her own family. I'd been more than patient, more than accommodating, only to be repeatedly stabbed in the back. If Bryce wasn't going to put his foot down, I knew I'd have to take matters into my own hands. Enough was enough. We're going to get to the bottom of this, I stated, struggling to keep my voice steady. And if you are responsible, Olivia, there will be consequences, serious ones. She opened her mouth as if to protest, but seemed to think better of it. A tense, furious silence stretched between us all. I could feel control of the situation rapidly slipping through my fingers, but I'll be damned if I'd let that deceitful little schemer take advantage of me in my own home any longer. After the confrontation over my missing bracelet, the atmosphere in the house was utterly toxic. Bryce remained stubbornly defensive of Olivia, refusing to even entertain the possibility that she had stolen from me. You're letting your grudge against her cloud your judgment, he accused after another heated argument. Olivia may be a lot of things, but a thief? Come on, Mom. His blind loyalty infuriated me to no end. How could he not see through her manipulative lies and excuses? Then where is my bracelet, Bryce? I challenged. It didn't just sprout legs and walk away. He shook his head in exasperation. I don't know, but accusing her with no proof is only going to further divide this family. Proof. The word rang in my ears like a whispered taunt. If only I had undeniable evidence of Olivia's misdeeds to make Bryce see the truth. The thought gnawed at me over the following days until a possible solution emerged. If she was so emboldened to steal from me in my own home, chances were it wasn't her first offense. I needed a way to catch her red-handed. One afternoon, while Bryce was at work, I seized the opportunity to bring up the idea to Olivia. Since my valuables keep disappearing, I've decided to install security cameras around the house. Her eyes went comically wide at my declaration. You're joking, right? I leveled her with a steely gaze. Does it look like I'm joking? I won't have any more of my possessions stolen. Her expression contorted in outrage. This is a massive violation of privacy. I am not going to be recorded in my own home. Your home? I arched an eyebrow. Need I remind you that you're a guest here, Olivia? This is my house, my rules. She opened her mouth to protest further, but seemed to think better of it. Instead, she simply glared at me with undisguised contempt. I'm not surprised you'd stoop to such extreme paranoid behavior, she spat. Just remember, what's recorded can be used against you too. The veiled threat didn't rattle me in the slightest. I'm a law-abiding citizen with nothing to hide. Can you say the same? She flinched ever so slightly at the barb, but quickly regained her composure with a disdainful sniff. Whatever, do what you want, you miserable old bat. The cruel insult stung, but I refused to show it. I would not give her the satisfaction. Over the next few days, I meticulously set up cameras throughout the main living areas, ensuring they captured every angle. Olivia shot me venomous looks whenever she passed them, but I didn't care. One way or another, I would expose her for the lying thief she was. Bryce, however, was livid when he discovered the cameras. Are you kidding me with this, Mom? He erupted. Putting surveillance in your own home? That's a massive breach of trust. Your wife is the one who broke trust by stealing from me, I countered heatedly. I have every right to protect myself and my property. He ran an exasperated hand through his hair. There's no proof she stole anything. This is just your grudge against her, spiraling out of control. Then the cameras will prove her innocence, won't they? I challenged. He shook his head in disgust. You're going way too far with this. If you don't take those down immediately, we're out of here for good. The words struck me like a physical blow. He was really going to abandon me. His own mother, over that deceitful snake of a wife? But even more than the hurt, I felt a cold fury settle over me. If getting hard evidence was the only way to make Bryce see Olivia's true colors, then so be it. I would do whatever was necessary to protect what was rightfully mine, no matter how far I had to go. Despite Bryce's outrage over the cameras, I refused to back down. If he couldn't see reason, if he insisted on siding with Olivia over his own mother, then I had no choice but to get proof of her deceit. Sure enough, it didn't take long for the cameras to expose her true colors. I was reviewing the footage one afternoon when I spotted Olivia slipping into my bedroom, clearly thinking I was out running errands. My heart pounded as I watched her rifle through my jewelry box, pocketing a pair of diamond earrings without a shred of guilt. White-hot fury coursed through me as the evidence of her betrayal played out right before my eyes. That lying, thieving little serpent. I stormed into the living room just as she was emerging from my bedroom, the earrings still clutched in her hand. She froze like a deer in headlights. You, I sputtered, struggling to find words amid my rage. Olivia quickly regained her composure, putting on an air of feigned innocence. Francine, I can explain. Save your lies? I roared, snatching the earrings from her grasp. I have you on camera, you deceitful brat, stealing from me in my own home. Her expression contorted into an ugly sneer. So what? You've treated me like garbage from day one. I was just taking a few trinkets as compensation. Compensation? I echoed in disbelief. For me opening my home to you out of the goodness of my heart? You're delusional. Olivia jutted out her chin defiantly. It's not delusional to expect a basic level of respect and decency, but clearly that's too much for a miserable, bitter old woman like you. The cruel insult felt like a slap to the face. Before I could retort, the front door swung open and Bryce stepped inside from work. His eyes went wide at the heated confrontation before him. What's going on here? I whirled towards him, earrings in hand. Your thieving wife is what's going on. I have proof, on camera, of her stealing my valuables. Bryce's gaze bounced between us, utterly bewildered. Olivia quickly tried to spin her web of lies. Francine is twisting everything. Those are my earrings, and she just barged in and attacked me. Don't you dare play the victim. I raged, feeling hot tears of fury burn in my eyes. I caught you red-handed, you ungrateful, entitled little... Enough, Bryce shouted, bringing the screaming match to a halt. He turned to Olivia, his expression hardening. Is it true? Did you steal from my mother? For a brief moment, I saw the flicker of guilt and shame cross her face before the mask of indignation slipped back into place. She's got her precious cameras rolling, Olivia spat bitterly. Why don't you see the proof for yourself? An uneasy silence fell over the room. Bryce looked utterly crestfallen, as if the reality were finally unavoidable. I need to see this footage, he said in a strained voice. Then we can discuss. His words trailed off, the unspoken implication hanging in the air, that this could very well be the breaking point, the moment where harsh truths and consequences could no longer be avoided. I felt a grim sense of vindication as I led them to the recorded evidence. My son would finally be forced to accept his wife's deceitful criminal ways. But even that seemed like cold comfort as the divide in our family grew ever wider. Olivia's greed and cruelty had brought us to this ugly crossroads, and I feared there would be no turning back, no matter how the chips fell. After being caught red-handed on the security footage, you'd think Olivia would have some semblance of shame or remorse. But that deceitful woman remained defiant and unapologetic as ever. So I took a few little trinkets, so what? She sneered when Bryce demanded an explanation. Your mother has been treating me like a prisoner in my own home. Bryce looked utterly crestfallen as the reality sank in. Olivia, you stole from my own mother. That's not okay, no matter how you try to justify it, she scoffed derisively. Don't play dumb, Bryce. You know how miserable and controlling she's been towards me. By letting you stay here rent-free? I interjected hotly. By opening my home to you when you couldn't support yourselves? Olivia whirled on me with undisguised contempt. Oh, don't act so high and mighty. You've had it out for me from day one, you bitter old... That's enough, Bryce shouted, cutting off her vicious tirade. He turned to me, his expression pained. Mom, I'm so sorry you had to go through this. I never imagined Olivia could stoop so low. His words should have given me solace after all her cruelty and disrespect. But they only filled me with dread over what vile act she might attempt next. Sure enough, in the following days, Olivia's behavior took an even darker turn. She stopped speaking to me entirely, shooting venomous glares my way while making snide comments under her breath, an unrelenting campaign of intimidation. Then the really twisted games began. First, it was little things, my belongings going missing only to turn up in bizarre places, my reading glasses stashed in the freezer, my sewing kit dumped into the toilet, juvenile pranks clearly designed to upset and unnerve me. When I tried confronting her about it, she'd play dumb with that infuriatingly innocent look. Maybe you're just losing your marbles in your old age, Francine? I knew she was responsible, could feel it in my gut. But without proof, Bryce seemed hesitant to accuse his wife of such cruelty. The final indignity came when I received a letter stating that an anonymous complaint had been filed against me for running an illegal boarding house out of my home. This has gone too far, Olivia, I erupted after reading the sickening letter. Trying to get me evicted from my own property? Over what, some stolen jewelry? She blinked up at me with those big doe-like eyes. Whatever are you talking about, Francine? I've just been keeping to myself like you wanted. The blatant lies and gaslighting were enough to make my head spin. How could someone be so utterly devoid of conscience or empathy? Bryce stepped between us, looking just as overwhelmed and dismayed as I felt. Mom, you can't seriously think Olivia is behind that fraudulent complaint. Of course I do, I shot back, fighting the urge to slap that smug look off Olivia's face. She's been tormenting me for weeks as payback for exposing her as a thief. Olivia's expression hardened like ice. You're the one making ridiculous accusations with no proof, as usual. I'm just the victim here. The audacity of her playing the victim after all she'd put me through, it was unforgivable, unconscionable. In that moment, something inside me finally snapped. I would no longer be bullied and tormented by this vindictive, entitled little monster. Not in my own home. If she wanted a war, then she had better be ready for the fight of her life. Because this time, I would not back down until I had justice, no matter what it took. After Olivia's cruel attempt to have me evicted, I knew I had to take decisive action. Her escalating campaign of intimidation and torment had gone too far. It was time to fight fire with fire. First order of business was gathering all the evidence I had, the footage from my security cameras, documentation of her pranks and missing valuables, even that fraudulent complaint letter. I compiled it all meticulously into a file, my hands shaking with rage and determination. Next, I paid a visit to the best lawyer in town, a stern, no-nonsense woman named Patricia. She listened intently as I laid out Olivia's pattern of abuse and theft. This is a clear-cut case of harassment and exploitation of an elder, Patricia stated after reviewing my evidence. Not to mention the stolen valuables could constitute grand larceny charges. Relief washed over me at her blunt assessment. Finally, someone who could see the situation for what it was. So you'll take my case? Against my daughter-in-law? Patricia's expression was grim but reassuring. I don't tolerate anyone who preys on and mistreats the vulnerable. Miss Lawrence, this girl needs to be stopped by any legal means necessary. With those words, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The prospect of having the law on my side, of finally getting justice, was immensely empowering. Olivia wouldn't know what hit her. When I returned home, Bryce and Olivia were waiting with matching looks of concern. "Where have you been?" Bryce asked apprehensively. "We were starting to worry when you didn't answer your phone." I leveled a look at Olivia, filled with a new sense of emboldened calm, dealing with something I should have handled a long time ago. Her brow furrowed with a flash of unease. What's that supposed to mean? Instead of answering, I pulled out the paperwork Patricia had prepared and slid it across the table. "A restraining order petition?" Bryce sputtered, quickly scanning the documents. "And intent to pursue charges for theft and harassment?" Olivia's eyes went wide with panic. "You're insane! You can't do this!" "I am well within my rights," I stated firmly. "I have more than enough evidence of your despicable behavior, your cruelty and disrespect towards me in my own home." She opened her mouth, but seemingly thought better of protesting. A look of cold fury contorted her features. "This is a mistake, Francine," she hissed through gritted teeth. "A huge mistake." Bryce's expression was utterly crestfallen as he looked between us. I can't believe it's come to this. Mom, are you sure this is what you want?" My gaze remained steely. "Your wife has given me no choice. I will not be intimidated or taken advantage of any longer, not after everything I've sacrificed." An uneasy silence fell over the room. Olivia looked like she wanted to lash out, to rage and hurl insults, as she always did, but she seemed to recognize the severity of the situation. Finally, Bryce spoke up in a hoarse whisper. "I don't know what to say, except that I'm so sorry you felt forced into this, Mom. I really hoped Olivia and I could make things right." A pang of sadness tugged at my heart to see my only son so utterly defeated. But I knew in that moment that I had to remain resolute, to protect myself at all costs from his manipulative wife. "I'm sorry too, Bryce," I replied, hiding the waver in my voice, "but your wife made her choices, and now she'll have to face the consequences." I stepped through the front door, my heart heavy with worries about my son Jake and his family. As I entered the living room, I froze at the sight before me. My husband Doug had our 8-year-old grandson Caleb pinned against the wall, his face contorted with rage. "Where's the money, you little thief?" Doug snarled, shaking Caleb roughly. "I know you stole it from my wallet." Caleb sobbed, his face streaked with tears. "I didn't take anything, Grandpa. I swear." "Doug, what are you doing?" I cried out, rushing over to pull him away from Caleb. "Have you lost your mind? He's just a child." Doug released his grip on Caleb, who ran to me and buried his face against my legs, trembling. I wrapped my arms around him protectively, shocked by my husband's uncharacteristic outburst. "Money's missing from my office," Doug said gruffly, avoiding my accusing stare, "and this little brat was snooping around in there earlier." "That doesn't mean Caleb took anything," I said firmly, stroking our grandson's hair to soothe him. "You know he would never steal from us." Doug's jaw clenched. "Well, the money didn't just disappear on its own. Someone in this house is a thief." My mind reeled as I tried to make sense of the situation. Jake and his wife Amber had always seemed like the perfect couple, doting parents to Caleb. What could have driven one of them to steal from us? Just then, the front door opened and Amber walked in, her pretty face etched with worry. "What's going on?" I heard shouting. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene, Doug's furious expression, Caleb clinging to me and crying. I saw a flicker of fear cross her features before she masked it. "Doug, I need to talk to you," Amber said, her voice shaking slightly. "In private. It's important." I tensed, sensing that whatever she had to say would be the key to unraveling this painful mystery. After settling Caleb in the kitchen with a snack, I followed Doug and Amber to the back patio, bracing myself for the truth. Amber took a deep breath, twisting her hands nervously. "I know what happened to the missing money," she said, her eyes welling with tears. "It was me. I took it." Doug exploded. "You lying, thieving." "Let her explain," I cut him off sharply before turning to Amber. "Why would you do this? Steal from your own family?" She broke down, sobs racking her slender frame. "I'm so sorry," Amber choked out. "I never meant for it to go this far, but I'm in trouble, deep trouble." The story came out between gasping breaths and fresh tears. Amber had been hiding a serious gambling addiction, racking up massive debts in secret. Desperate to get money to pay off her bookies before Jake found out, she had resorted to pilfering cash from Doug's office for months. "Please, you can't tell Jake," she begged us. "It will destroy our marriage. I'll get help, I swear. Just give me a chance to make this right." I looked at Doug, seeing my own shock and disappointment mirrored in his eyes. Our once perfect family was crumbling before us, torn apart by Amber's deceit. Could we really keep such a devastating secret from our own son? My heart ached as I realized the impossible choice that lay ahead. No matter what we did next, someone would get hurt, and the scars left behind may never fully heal. The weight of Amber's confession hung heavy in the air as Doug and I sat across from her at the kitchen table. Her once carefully applied makeup was now smeared from crying, her eyes red and puffy. "How could you do this to Jake?" "To Caleb?" I asked, my voice thick with disappointment. "Your gambling addiction has put your entire family at risk." Amber flinched as if I'd slapped her. "I never meant for it to get this bad." "But," she whispered, At first it was just a little money here and there, but then I started losing more than I could afford. Doug slammed his fist on the table, making us both jump. And you thought stealing from me was the answer? Do you have any idea how much trouble you're in? I'm sorry, Amber sobbed. I was desperate. The bookies were threatening me, saying they'd come after Jake and Caleb if I didn't pay up. A chill ran down my spine at the thought of my son and grandson in danger because of Amber's reckless behavior. How had she let things spiral so far out of control? How much do you owe? I asked, dreading the answer. Amber hesitated, her gaze dropping to her lap. $50,000, she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Doug let out a low whistle. Jesus Christ, Amber, that's more than Jake makes in a year. How the hell are you going to pay that back? I don't know, she said miserably. But I have to try. I can't let Jake find out about this. It would destroy him. I felt a flare of anger at her words. You should have thought of that before you started gambling away your family's future, I snapped. Amber's shoulders shook with fresh sobs. I know, but please, Tina. Doug, you can't tell Jake. I'm begging you. I exchanged a long look with my husband, seeing the conflict in his eyes. As much as we wanted to protect our son from the truth, we both knew that keeping Amber's secret would only make things worse in the long run. We can't lie to Jake, I said firmly. He deserves to know what's going on. Amber's face crumpled. Please, just give me a chance to fix this on my own. I'll do whatever it takes. Get a second job. Sell some of my things. I'll make it right, I swear. Doug shook his head. And what happens when the bookies come knocking on Jake's door demanding their money? Are you going to put your husband and child in danger to cover your own ass? No, of course not, Amber cried. I would never let that happen. But if Jake finds out, he'll leave me. I can't lose my family over this. I felt a pang of sympathy for her, despite my anger and disappointment. Addiction was a terrible disease, one that could make even the most loving person behave in unthinkable ways. You need help, Amber, I said gently. Professional help, and you need to come clean to Jake before things get any worse. She buried her face in her hands, her body shaking with the force of her sobs. I'm so scared, she whispered. What if he can't forgive me? I reached across the table to take her hand, feeling the tremors that ran through her. Jake loves you, I reminded her, but he deserves the truth, and you deserve the chance to get better, for yourself and for your family. Amber took a shuddering breath, then nodded slowly. You're right, she said, her voice small but determined. I'll tell him everything tonight, and I'll get help. I promise. As I watched her walk out the door, shoulders slumped in defeat, I could only hope that it wasn't too late for her, or for the family she had so nearly destroyed with her lies. The sound of the front door slamming jolted me awake. I glanced at the clock on the nightstand, 2:37 a.m. My heart sank as I heard Jake's heavy footsteps coming up the stairs, knowing that Amber must have finally confessed her gambling addiction to him. I pulled on my robe and hurried out into the hallway, nearly colliding with Doug. We exchanged a worried look before Jake appeared at the top of the stairs, his face a mask of anger and betrayal. Did you know? He demanded, his voice shaking. Did you know about Amber's gambling problem? I hesitated, not wanting to lie to my son, but also reluctant to admit the truth. She told us earlier today, I said carefully. We encouraged her to come clean to you. Jake let out a harsh laugh. Well, she certainly did that, right after I found a letter from some bookie threatening to break my kneecaps if she didn't pay up. Doug sucked in a sharp breath. Jesus, Jake, I'm so sorry. We had no idea it had gotten that bad. Bad? Jake echoed incredulously. It's a fucking disaster. My wife has been lying to me for months, stealing money from her own family to feed her addiction. And now we're in debt up to our eyeballs with no way out. I reached out to touch his arm, but he jerked away from me. Jake, please. Amber needs help. She's sick. She's a liar and a thief, he spat. I don't even know who she is anymore. The venom in his voice made me flinch. I had never seen my son so angry, so hurt. It broke my heart to think of the pain Amber had caused him. What are you going to do? Doug asked quietly. Jake ran a hand over his face, looking suddenly exhausted. I don't know, he admitted. Part of me wants to walk away and never look back, but we have Caleb to think about. At the mention of their son, I felt a surge of protectiveness. You can't let Amber's mistakes tear your family apart, I urged. Caleb needs both of his parents. Does he? Jake asked bitterly. Does he need a mother who lies and steals and puts her own selfish desires above her family's well-being? I opened my mouth to argue, but Doug cut me off with a sharp look. That's not your decision to make, Tina, he said firmly. Jake and Amber need to work this out for themselves. Jake nodded, his jaw clenched tight. I need some time to think, he said. I can't even look at her right now without wanting to scream. Why don't you stay here tonight? I offered. Give yourself some space to clear your head. For a moment I thought he might refuse, but then his shoulders slumped in defeat. Yeah, okay, he agreed. Thanks, Mom. As I watched him disappear into the guest room, I felt a wave of helplessness wash over me. I wanted so badly to fix this for him, to take away his pain and anger. But I knew that this was a battle he would have to fight on his own. I turned to Doug, seeing the same worry and frustration etched on his face. What are we going to do? I asked softly. He sighed heavily. We support them, he said, both of them, and we pray like hell that they find a way through this mess. I nodded, blinking back the tears that threatened to fall. I knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult for Jake and Amber, but I also knew that as a family, we would face it together, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The tension in the air was palpable as Doug and I sat across from Jake at the kitchen table the next morning. He looked haggard, his eyes bloodshot from a sleepless night. I pushed a mug of coffee towards him, but he ignored it, his gaze fixed on some distant point. Have you heard from Amber? I asked gently, breaking the heavy silence. Jake shook his head. No, and I don't want to. Not until I've figured out what I'm going to do. Doug leaned forward, his expression grim. I know you're hurting, son, but you need to think about Caleb in all this. He needs his mother? Does he? Jake asked bitterly. What kind of mother lies and steals from her own family? What kind of example is that setting for him? I flinched at the harshness in his voice. Jake, addiction is a disease. Amber needs help, not condemnation. She should have thought of that before she started gambling away our future, he snapped. Before she put our son at risk with her selfish behavior. Doug's face darkened. I agree. Amber's actions are inexcusable, and if it were up to me, I'd say you should cut her loose and never look back. Doug, I gasped, shocked by his callousness. How can you say that? She's your daughter-in-law, the mother of your grandson. He shrugged, unmoved. She stopped being family the moment she betrayed Jake's trust. As far as I'm concerned, he owes her nothing. Jake looked torn, his eyes darting between us. I don't know what to do, he admitted. I love Amber, but I don't know if I can ever trust her again. And Caleb, he needs stability, not a mother who could relapse at any moment. So fight for custody, Doug urged. Get a good lawyer and make sure Amber never has the chance to hurt Caleb again. I stared at my husband in disbelief. How could he be so cold, so unforgiving? Yes, Amber had made a terrible mistake, but she was still a part of our family, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing her completely. Please, Jake, I begged, don't make any rash decisions. Amber is getting help. She's trying to make things right. He shook his head, his jaw clenched tight. I don't know if I can forgive her, Mom, not after everything she's done. At least give her a chance to explain, I pleaded. Hear her out before you do anything drastic. For a long moment, Jake was silent. Then finally he nodded. Fine, I'll talk to her, but I'm not making any promises. Relief washed over me, even as Doug shot me a disapproving look. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult for all of us, but I couldn't give up on Amber, not when she needed us most. As Jake left to go confront his wife, I turned to Doug, my eyes narrowed. How could you be so cruel? I demanded. Amber is family. We can't just turn our backs on her. She stopped being family the moment she betrayed us, he said coldly. And if Jake has any sense, he'll cut her out of his life for good. I shook my head, feeling a surge of anger and disappointment. I never thought I'd see the day when you'd be so heartless, I said. Amber needs our support, not our condemnation. Doug's face hardened. She needs to face the consequences of her actions. And if that means losing her husband and son, then so be it. As he stalked out of the room, I felt a chill run down my spine. I had always known my husband to be a stern man, but never cruel. Now, I couldn't help but wonder if I even recognized the person he had become, or if our family would ever be the same again. The days following Jake and Amber's confrontation were tense and uncomfortable. My son had agreed to give his wife one more chance, but the trust between them had been shattered. I could see the strain on both their faces, the way they avoided each other's eyes and spoke in clipped, formal tones. I tried my best to be supportive, offering to watch Caleb so they could have time to talk things through. But every time I brought up the subject of Amber's addiction, Jake would shut down, his jaw clenching with barely suppressed anger. It was during one of these conversations that I made a shocking discovery. I was tidying up Doug's home office, sorting through the piles of paperwork that had accumulated on his desk, when I stumbled across a series of bank statements. At first glance, they seemed innocuous enough, but as I looked closer, I felt my blood run cold. There, in black and white, were a series of withdrawals from our joint savings account, thousands of dollars, all funneled into an account I didn't recognize. And the dates. They went back months, long before Amber's gambling addiction had come to light. With shaking hands, I confronted Doug that evening. "What is this?" I demanded, thrusting the statements at him. "Where has all this money been going?" For a moment, he looked like a deer caught in headlights. Then his expression hardened. "That's none of your concern, Tina. I'm handling it." "Handling what?" I pressed. "Doug, this is our money, our future. You can't just take it without telling me." He sighed heavily, running a hand over his face. "Fine. If you must know, I've been giving Amber money to help pay off her debts." I stared at him in disbelief. "What? Why would you do that? We agreed to let Jake and Amber handle this on their own." "Because I don't trust her," Doug said bluntly. "I've been keeping tabs on her, making sure she's not falling back into old habits, and when I saw how much she owed, I couldn't just stand by and do nothing." Anger surged through me, hot and bright. "So you went behind my back? Behind Jake's back? Doug, how could you?" "I did what I had to do to protect our family," he snapped. "Amber's addiction has already caused enough damage. I won't let her drag us down with her." I shook my head, feeling sick to my stomach. "This isn't protection, Doug. It's enabling. You're not helping Amber. You're just making it easier for her to keep gambling." "That's not true," he argued. "I've been making her give me receipts, proof that she's using the money to pay off her debts. I'm keeping her accountable." "And what happens when Jake finds out?" I demanded. "What happens when he realizes that his own father has been lying to him, just like Amber has?" Doug's face paled. "He won't find out because you're not going to tell him." I let out a harsh laugh. "You really expect me to keep this a secret from our son? Doug, this is wrong. You know it is." "What's wrong is letting Amber destroy our family," he said coldly. "And if keeping this secret is what it takes to prevent that, then so be it." I stared at him, hardly recognizing the man I had married, the man I had loved for over 40 years. In that moment, I realized that Doug's obsession with controlling Amber had blinded him to the damage he was causing, and I knew that if I didn't put a stop to it, our family might never recover. "No," I said firmly. "I won't be a part of this, not anymore. Amber needs help, not more lies and deceit, and if you can't see that, then I don't know what else to say to you." As I turned and walked away, I felt a heaviness in my heart that I had never known before. I had always believed that Doug and I were a team, that we could face anything together, but now I wasn't so sure. And that uncertainty terrified me more than anything else. The weeks that followed were some of the most difficult of my life. Doug and I barely spoke, the tension between us thick and suffocating. I threw myself into caring for Caleb, trying to provide some sense of normalcy for my grandson in the midst of all the chaos. But even that small comfort was shattered when Jake showed up at our door one evening, his face pale and drawn. "Amber's gone," he said, his voice hollow. "She left a note saying she couldn't take the pressure anymore, that she needed to get away and clear her head." My heart sank as I saw the pain in my son's eyes. "Oh, Jake, I'm so sorry. Do you have any idea where she might have gone?" He shook his head, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "No, she didn't say, but I think she might have relapsed. I found some new gambling receipts in her purse before she left." I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of despair wash over me. After everything we had been through, all the lies and betrayal, Amber had thrown away her second chance. And now my son and grandson were left to pick up the pieces. Over the next few days, I did my best to support Jake as he tried to track down his missing wife. He called every casino and racetrack in the area, hoping someone had seen her. But as the days stretched into weeks with no sign of Amber, I could see the hope draining from his eyes. It was during one of these fruitless searches that I overheard a conversation that chilled me to the bone. Jake was on the phone with one of Amber's old gambling buddies, his voice tight with anger and frustration. "What do you mean? She's planning to leave the state. Where is she going?" he demanded. There was a pause, then Jake's face turned ashen. "She's taking Caleb with her?" "No, no way in hell. She can't do that. Not without my permission." My heart seized with fear as I realized the depths of Amber's desperation. She wasn't just running away from her problems anymore. She was trying to kidnap her own son. I knew then that I had to do something. I couldn't let Amber destroy Jake's life any more than she already had, and I certainly couldn't let her take Caleb away from the only stable home he had ever known. So I made a decision that would change all of our lives forever. I called the police and reported Amber's plans, telling them everything I knew about her gambling addiction and the threats she had made against my family. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, betraying my own daughter-in-law like that. But I knew in my heart that it was the right thing to do. Caleb's safety had to come first, no matter what the cost. When the police arrived at Jake and Amber's house later that day, they found her in the midst of packing her bags, a confused and frightened Caleb by her side. She was arrested on the spot, charged with attempted kidnapping and child endangerment. I watched from the sidelines as they led her away in handcuffs, her face a mask of shock and disbelief. Jake stood nearby, his expression unreadable, as he held Caleb close. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice choked with tears. "I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't let her take Caleb away from you." For a long moment, Jake was silent. Then he turned to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and gratitude. "You did the right thing, Mom. I know it wasn't easy, but you protected Caleb. That's all that matters." As I watched the police car drive away, Amber's face pressed against the window in despair. I felt a sense of grim satisfaction wash over me. She had brought this on herself with her lies and her selfish choices, and now she would face the consequences. But even as I tried to convince myself that justice had been served, I couldn't shake the feeling that our family would never be the same again, that the wounds Amber had inflicted might never fully heal. The days following Amber's arrest were a blur of police interviews, legal meetings, and hushed conversations behind closed doors. Jake was a wreck, torn between his anger at his wife's betrayal and his fear for Caleb's well-being. I did my best to support him, but I could see the toll it was taking on him. It was during one of these tense discussions that I finally learned the full extent of Amber's plans. According to the police, she had been secretly funneling money into a private bank account for months, stockpiling cash for her eventual escape. And she had planned to take Caleb with her, fleeing the state and starting a new life somewhere far away from the consequences of her actions. The thought of losing my grandson forever made my blood run cold. I knew then that I had made the right decision in turning Amber in, no matter how much it hurt to betray her trust. But even as I tried to convince myself that I had done the right thing, I couldn't shake the nagging sense of guilt that plagued me. What if I had been too harsh on Amber? What if I had pushed her to this point with my constant criticism and judgment? These thoughts weighed heavily on my mind as I sat in the courtroom, watching as Amber was led in wearing handcuffs and an orange jumpsuit. She looked small and fragile, her once vibrant eyes now dull and lifeless. As the judge read out the charges against her, I saw a flicker of something in Amber's expression. Not remorse or regret, but a cold, calculating anger that made my skin crawl. And then, to my horror, she turned to face Jake and Caleb, her lips curling into a sneer. "You think you've won?" she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you can just cast me aside and move on with your lives? Well, think again." Jake recoiled as if he had been slapped, his face draining of color. Caleb whimpered and buried his face in his father's shoulder, too young to understand the cruel words being hurled at him. "I'll get out of here eventually," Amber continued, her eyes flashing with malice. "And when I do, I'll come for my son. I'll take him away from you, and you'll never see him again. That's a promise. The courtroom erupted into chaos, with the judge banging his gavel and ordering Amber to be removed from the room. But even as the bailiffs dragged her away, her words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I felt sick to my stomach as I watched Jake try to comfort a sobbing Caleb. How could Amber be so cruel, so selfish? How could she threaten to take away the one thing that mattered most to her own child? In that moment, I knew that I had to do everything in my power to protect my grandson, to make sure that Amber never had the chance to hurt him again. So I made a vow, right then and there. I would fight for Caleb no matter what it took. I would make sure that he grew up in a safe and loving home, surrounded by people who truly cared for him. And as for Amber, well, she had made her choices. She had chosen her addiction over her family, her own selfish desires over the well-being of her child. And now she would have to live with the consequences. As I left the courtroom that day, my heart heavy with grief and anger, I knew that our family would never be the same again. But I also knew that we would survive this, somehow. We would pick up the pieces and move forward one day at a time. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would be there for Jake and Caleb. Always. The years that followed Amber's sentencing were a time of healing and rebuilding for our family. Jake threw himself into his work, determined to provide a stable life for Caleb, and I did my best to be there for both of them, offering love and support whenever they needed it. But even as we tried to move forward, the specter of Amber's betrayal hung over us like a dark cloud. Caleb in particular struggled with the loss of his mother. He would often wake up crying in the middle of the night, calling out for her in his sleep. It broke my heart to see my grandson in so much pain, but I knew that we had made the right decision in cutting Amber out of our lives. She had proven time and again that she was not capable of being a good mother or a trustworthy partner. Still, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt whenever I thought about the role I had played in tearing our family apart. If I had been more understanding, more supportive of Amber's struggles, could things have turned out differently? These thoughts plagued me as I watched Jake and Caleb slowly rebuild their lives. Jake started dating again, eventually meeting a kind and loving woman named Sarah, who accepted Caleb as her own. And Caleb, with the help of therapy and a stable home life, began to thrive in school and make new friends. But even as our family healed and grew, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing, that there was a piece of our hearts that would always belong to Amber, no matter how much we tried to forget her. It all came to a head one day when I was cleaning out some old boxes in the attic. I stumbled across a photo album from Jake and Amber's wedding day, their smiling faces beaming up at me from the pages. As I flipped through the pictures, memories of happier times flooding back, I felt a sudden wave of emotion wash over me. Anger, sadness, regret, it all came rushing back in a tidal wave of grief. And then, as if summoned by my thoughts, the phone rang. It was Amber, calling from prison. She had been granted early release for good behavior and wanted to see Caleb. I felt my heart constrict with fear and anger as I listened to her plead her case. How dare she, after everything she had put us through? How could she possibly think that we would let her back into our lives? But as I listened to the desperation in her voice, the genuine remorse and longing, I felt something inside me soften. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for redemption. Maybe Amber had truly changed and was ready to be the mother Caleb deserved. I knew it was a risk. I knew that Jake would be furious with me for even considering it. But in that moment, I made a decision that would change all of our lives once again. I agreed to let Amber see Caleb, under strict supervision and with the understanding that she would have to prove herself worthy of a place in his life. It was a gamble, a leap of faith, but one that I felt compelled to take. As I hung up the phone, my heart racing with a mixture of fear and hope, I knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be setbacks and challenges, moments of doubt and pain. But I also knew that if there was even a chance of bringing our family back together, of healing the wounds that had torn us apart, I had to try. For Caleb's sake, for Jake's sake, and for the sake of the love that had once bound us all together. And so, with a deep breath and a silent prayer, I prepared myself for the journey ahead. A journey of forgiveness, of second chances, and of the power of a mother's love to overcome even the darkest of betrayals. I stared at the test results in disbelief, my hands trembling. Eli's blood type was AB. How could that be possible when both Nolan and I had type O? The implications were staggering, and I felt my world starting to crumble. "There must be some mistake," I said, my voice barely above a whisper as I faced the stern-faced doctor. "Eli's blood type can't be AB. That's not possible." The doctor shook his head solemnly. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Parker, but the tests were conclusive. Your son's blood type is definitely AB." I sank back into the chair, my mind racing. How could this be happening? Nolan and I had been together for over a decade, and Eli was the product of our loving marriage. Yet this medical anomaly threatened to shatter everything I thought I knew. Just then, the door burst open, and Nolan stormed in, his face twisted with rage. "What the hell is going on, Jenna?" he demanded, his eyes narrowing. "The nurse said Eli's in the ICU and that his blood type is AB?" I steeled myself, knowing I had to be honest, even if it meant facing Nolan's wrath. "Yes, that's right. The test results are conclusive. Eli's blood type is AB, which is impossible given our own blood types." Nolan's face turned beet red, and he slammed his fist against the wall, making me flinch. "Impossible? The only thing impossible here is that Eli is my son. You've been unfaithful, haven't you, Jenna?" "What? No, Nolan, that's not true," I protested, my heart racing. "I would never do that to you or to Eli. You have to believe me." He let out a harsh laugh, shaking his head. "Believe you? How can I, when the evidence is right in front of us? Eli's not my son, which means you've been lying to me all this time." Tears welled up in my eyes as I reached out to him, desperately trying to make him understand. "Nolan, please, you have to listen to me. I would never cheat on you. Eli is your son. I swear it. There must be some other explanation for this." But Nolan was having none of it. He backed away, his face contorted with a mixture of hurt and anger. "Save it, Jenna. I've heard enough. I'm going to get a DNA test, and then we'll see who the real father is. And if Eli's not mine, well, let's just say you better start planning your future without us." With that, he stormed out, leaving me shattered and alone, my world turned upside down. I had to find a way to prove my innocence and save my family, no matter what it took. As I sat there, the weight of the situation pressing down on me, I knew one thing for certain: my life would never be the same again. The tension between Nolan and me had been simmering for years, but I never imagined it would boil over in such a devastating way. As I sat in the hospital, my mind raced, trying to make sense of the chaos that had erupted. Nolan's accusation of infidelity stung like a slap in the face. After all we'd been through together, how could he so easily dismiss my loyalty and faithfulness? But I knew his outburst was fueled by more than just the revelation about Eli's blood type. I thought back to the early days of our marriage, when Nolan's overbearing mother, Marge, had made my life a living hell. She was never satisfied, always finding fault with everything I did. No matter how hard I tried to please her, it was never enough. Marge had passed away a year ago, but her lingering influence still seemed to haunt our relationship. Nolan had always been quick to side with his mother, even when she was clearly in the wrong. It was as if he couldn't see past her manipulations, and I often felt like an outsider in my own home. Now, with Eli's unexpected blood type, Nolan had found the perfect excuse to turn on me. I knew I had to fight back, to prove my innocence and protect my son. I decided to seek legal counsel, determined to navigate this treacherous situation with a clear head and a solid strategy. As I waited in the attorney's office, I couldn't help but reflect on the numerous times Nolan had threatened to take Eli away from me. "If you ever step out of line, Jenna, I'll make sure you never see that boy again," he'd growl, his eyes dark with menace. The thought of losing Eli was my greatest fear, and I knew I had to do whatever it took to keep him safe. When the attorney finally arrived, I laid out the entire situation, leaving no detail untouched. She listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. "This is a very serious situation, Mrs. Parker," she said, her voice grave. "With Eli's blood type not matching either of yours and your husband's volatile reaction, we're looking at a custody battle that could get ugly." I swallowed hard, steeling myself for the fight ahead. I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to protect my son and prove my innocence. Nolan's accusations are completely unfounded, and I won't let him take Eli away from me. The attorney nodded, a glimmer of respect in her eyes. Good. We'll need to start gathering evidence, including your medical records and any documentation that could shed light on Nolan's family history. If there's a discrepancy there, it could be the key to unraveling this entire mess. I felt a surge of determination. I'm ready. Let's do this. As I left the attorney's office, I knew that the battle lines had been drawn. Nolan's threats and Marge's lingering influence had only fueled my resolve. I would fight tooth and nail to keep my family together, no matter the cost. The drive home from the attorney's office was filled with a sense of urgency and determination. I knew that time was of the essence if I wanted to clear my name and keep Eli safe from Nolan's threats. As soon as I walked through the door, I headed straight to my home office, determined to start gathering the evidence I would need to build my case. I started by pulling up Eli's medical records, scrutinizing every detail, searching for any clues that could help explain the mysterious blood type discrepancy. But as I pored over the documents, I hit a wall. There was nothing out of the ordinary, no obvious explanations to be found. Frustrated, I decided to turn my attention to Nolan's family history, hoping that might shed some light on the situation. I began scouring through old family photos and documents, piecing together the puzzle of Nolan's past. It was then that I stumbled upon a curious letter, hidden away in the back of a desk drawer. The envelope was addressed to Nolan, but it had never been opened. My heart racing, I carefully tore it open, my eyes scanning the contents. What I read made my blood run cold. The letter was from Nolan's estranged aunt, Clara, and it contained a bombshell revelation. Nolan had been adopted as a child after being found abandoned. The details were sparse, but the implications were staggering. I quickly dialed Clara's number, my hands trembling. When she answered, I wasted no time in getting to the heart of the matter. "Clara, it's Jenna. I need to talk to you about Nolan. I found your letter, and I need to know the truth about his adoption." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost feel Clara's hesitation. "Jenna, I knew this day would come," she finally said, her voice heavy with regret. "Nolan's adoption was always a closely guarded family secret. Marge made sure of that." I gripped the phone tighter, my heart pounding. "Then it's true? Nolan was adopted?" "Yes, it's true," Clara confirmed, her words laced with sadness. "Nolan was found abandoned as a baby, and my brother and sister-in-law Marge adopted him. They never told him the truth, and Marge made sure no one else in the family ever breathed a word of it." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. If Nolan had been adopted, then that meant... Oh my God, Clara, Eli's blood type. It all makes sense now. "I'm so sorry, Jenna," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is a terrible situation. I didn't know how to tell Nolan the truth, and now it's come to this." I took a deep, steadying breath, my mind racing with the implications of this revelation. "Clara, I need your help. I have to prove my innocence, and Nolan's adoption is the key. Will you testify to what you know?" There was a long pause, and then Clara's voice filled with resolve. "Yes, Jenna. I'll do whatever it takes to help you and Eli. This family has kept this secret for too long, and it's time the truth came out." As I hung up the phone, a glimmer of hope began to take root. With Clara's testimony and the evidence I'd gathered, I might just have a chance of proving my innocence and protecting my family. But the road ahead would be anything but easy. The drive to Clara's house was filled with a mixture of anticipation and dread. I knew that the information she possessed could be the key to unraveling this entire mess, but I also feared the fallout that might come from the truth being revealed. As I pulled into her driveway, I steeled myself, determined to get the answers I needed, no matter how difficult they might be. When Clara opened the door, the sadness in her eyes was palpable. "Thank you for coming, Jenna," she said, ushering me inside. "I know this isn't going to be easy, but I'm glad you reached out." We settled into the living room, the air thick with tension. I wasted no time in getting straight to the point. "Clara, I need you to tell me everything you know about Nolan's adoption. The truth could be the only thing that saves my family." She nodded solemnly, taking a deep breath before speaking. "It all started with my brother, Nolan's adoptive father. He and Marge had been trying for years to have a child, but it just never happened. Then one day, they found a baby abandoned in a park. That baby was Nolan." I felt a lump forming in my throat as Clara continued. Marge was over the moon, of course. She saw it as a miracle, a second chance. But she was also terrified that the truth would come out, that Nolan would someday discover he was adopted. "So they kept it a secret?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Clara replied, her eyes filled with regret. "Marge made sure no one in the family ever breathed a word of it. She was convinced that if Nolan found out, he would be devastated and that it would ruin his life." I shook my head, the pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place. But that's why Eli's blood type is AB, isn't it? Nolan's not his real father." Clara nodded solemnly. "I'm afraid so, Jenna. Nolan's true blood type is AB, which is why Eli's doesn't match yours or Nolan's. The secret has been buried for so long, and now it's threatening to tear your family apart." I felt a surge of anger, mixed with a deep sense of betrayal. All this time, Nolan has been accusing me of infidelity, when the truth is he's not even Eli's biological father. I clenched my fists, my eyes narrowing. "And Marge, she must have known. She's been tormenting me all these years, hasn't she?" Clara nodded solemnly. "I'm afraid so, Jenna. Marge was ruthless in her determination to keep this secret hidden. She saw you as a threat to her perfect little family, and she did everything she could to make your life miserable." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, the gravity of the situation finally sinking in. This is unbelievable. Nolan has to know the truth. He deserves to know who he really is. Clara's eyes widened with alarm. "Jenna, I'm not sure that's a good idea. Nolan has always been unstable, and this revelation could push him over the edge. You need to be careful." I shook my head resolutely. "I don't care, Clara. I have to tell him. The truth is the only thing that can set us free from this nightmare." With that, I rose to my feet, determined to confront Nolan and finally put an end to his baseless accusations. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was willing to risk it all to protect my family and reclaim my own integrity. As I drove back home, my mind raced with the implications of what Clara had revealed. Nolan's true blood type, his secret adoption. It was all too much to process. But I knew I had to act quickly if I wanted to protect Eli and clear my name. I pulled into the driveway, steeling myself for the confrontation that was to come. Nolan was waiting for me, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Where have you been, Jenna?" he demanded, his voice dripping with accusation. "I've been trying to reach you all afternoon." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. "I've been speaking with Clara, Nolan. There's something we need to discuss." He scoffed, his arms crossing over his chest. "Clara? What could that old bat possibly have to say that's worth my time?" "It's about you, Nolan," I said, my voice steady. "About your past. About the fact that you were adopted." The color drained from his face, and for a moment he seemed at a loss for words. "What are you talking about?" he finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "The truth, Nolan," I replied, my gaze unwavering. "Clara told me everything. How you were found abandoned as a baby. How your mother, Marge, made sure the family kept it a secret all these years." Nolan's eyes widened, a mix of shock and rage flickering across his features. "You're lying," he shouted, his fists clenching at his sides. "This is just another one of your pathetic attempts to turn me against my own family." I held up a hand, silencing him. "I'm not lying, Nolan, and I have proof, a letter from Clara confirming everything she told me." He stared at me, his chest heaving with each labored breath. No, this can't be happening," he muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. "But it is, Nolan," I said, my voice tinged with sympathy. "And it explains Eli's blood type. You're not his biological father." The realization hit him like a punch to the gut, and he staggered backward, his face contorted with anguish. You cheated on me," he gasped, his eyes wild with accusation. "This is all your fault." I shook my head, refusing to back down. "No, Nolan, Eli is your son, but not biologically. You were adopted, and that's why your blood types don't match." He stared at me for a long, tense moment, his breathing ragged. Then, without warning, he lunged forward, his hands closing around my throat. "You bitch!" he snarled, his grip tightening. "You're trying to take everything from me!" I clawed at his hands, gasping for air, my heart pounding in my ears. Just then, the door burst open, and a group of people rushed in. A mediator, a court-appointed guardian, and my attorney. "That's enough, Mr. Parker," the mediator said, her voice firm and commanding. "Let go of your wife, and we can discuss this like civilized adults." Nolan's grip loosened, and he backed away, his chest heaving. I coughed and sputtered, my hands trembling. "What is the meaning of this?" Nolan demanded, his eyes darting between the gathered group. "We're here to help, Nolan," I said, my voice hoarse. "I've arranged a mediated meeting so we can discuss Eli's future and resolve this situation in a constructive way." Nolan's eyes narrowed, his expression twisted with suspicion. "You're up to something, Jenna. I can see it in your eyes." I met his gaze, my own eyes steely with determination. "Yes, Nolan. I'm going to prove my innocence and protect my family, no matter what it takes." The mediated meeting was tense from the moment we all gathered in the conference room. Nolan sat across from me, his arms crossed over his chest, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. The mediator, a seasoned family counselor, introduced herself and set the tone for the proceedings. "All right, let's start by getting everything out in the open," she said, her voice calm and measured. "Jenna, you've requested this meeting to discuss some important matters regarding your son, Eli. Would you like to begin?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation that was to come. "Yes, thank you," I replied, my gaze locked with Nolan's. "As you all know, Eli's recent hospitalization revealed a concerning discrepancy in his blood type. It's come to my attention that Nolan was actually adopted as a child and that his true blood type is AB." Nolan's face drained of color, and he shot to his feet, his chair clattering to the floor behind him. "This is outrageous," he shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "Jenna is lying, trying to twist the truth to suit her own agenda." The mediator raised a hand, her expression stern. "Mr. Parker, please sit down and allow Jenna to continue. We're here to have a constructive dialogue, not hurl accusations." Nolan reluctantly complied, his jaw clenched tightly, his eyes smoldering with rage. "Jenna, please go on," the mediator prompted. I took another deep breath, my gaze unwavering. "Nolan's aunt, Clara, has confirmed that Nolan was indeed adopted as a baby, and that his blood type is AB. This explains why Eli's blood type doesn't match either of ours. Nolan is not Eli's biological father." The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Nolan's face was a mask of anguish and disbelief, his hands trembling. No, this can't be true," he stammered, his voice breaking. "You're trying to destroy me, Jenna. You've always hated my family, and now you're using this to take Eli away from me." The mediator held up a hand, her expression sympathetic. "Mr. Parker, I understand this must be a difficult revelation, but we need to remain focused on finding a resolution that is in the best interest of your son." Nolan shook his head vehemently, his eyes wild. "Best interest? Jenna's the one who's betrayed me, betrayed our family. She's been unfaithful, and now she's trying to take Eli away." I felt a surge of anger and frustration. "Nolan, I've never been unfaithful to you. Eli is your son, just not biologically. Your own family has been keeping this secret from you all these years, and I'm trying to bring the truth to light for all of our sakes." The mediator nodded, her gaze shifting between us. "Clearly, there are deeper issues at play here that need to be addressed. Jenna, you mentioned having evidence to support your claims. Would you be willing to share that with us?" I reached into my bag and pulled out the letter from Clara, handing it to the mediator. "This letter from Nolan's aunt, Clara, confirms his adoption and the fact that his blood type is AB. It's the proof I've been searching for to clear my name and protect my family." The mediator scanned the letter, her brow furrowing in concentration. Nolan watched, his face a mask of anguish and disbelief, as the truth of his past unraveled before him. "This appears to be a legitimate document," the mediator finally said, her voice grave. "Mr. Parker, I'm afraid the evidence presented here does substantiate Jenna's claims." Nolan's world seemed to crumble before my eyes, his carefully constructed reality shattered beyond repair. As he sat there, his body shaking with a mix of emotions, I knew that the tide had finally turned in my favor. The aftermath of the mediated meeting was nothing short of explosive. Nolan, reeling from the revelation of his adoption and the truth about Eli's paternity, had spiraled into a state of emotional turmoil. As the mediator's words sank in, his face contorted with a mix of anguish and rage. He pushed himself away from the table, his chair clattering to the floor as he paced the room like a caged animal. "This can't be happening," he muttered, his hands trembling. "It's all a lie, a conspiracy to destroy me. The mediator tried to interject, her voice calm and measured, but Nolan cut her off with a vicious swipe of his hand. "No, you listen to me," he shouted, his eyes wild. "Jenna has been unfaithful, and she's using this nonsense about my adoption to take Eli away from me." I felt a surge of anger and frustration, but I forced myself to remain composed. "Nolan, please," I pleaded, my voice steady. "This isn't about taking Eli away from you. It's about protecting him and our family from the truth you've been hiding all these years." Nolan's gaze locked with mine, his expression contorted with a mix of hurt and betrayal. "Protecting him?" he spat. "You're the one who's been lying, Jenna. You've betrayed me, and now you want to take everything I have." The mediator intervened, her voice firm. "Mr. Parker, I understand this is an extremely difficult situation, but we need to remain focused on the best interests of your son. Attacking your wife is not going to solve anything." Nolan's nostrils flared, and for a moment I thought he might lash out again. But then something seemed to shift in his demeanor, and he slumped back into his chair, his head in his hands. "This can't be happening," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "My whole life has been a lie." I felt a twinge of sympathy, despite everything that had happened. "Nolan, I know this is hard, but we need to find a way to move forward for Eli's sake." He lifted his head, his eyes filled with anguish. "Move forward? How can I, when everything I thought I knew has been ripped away from me?" The mediator leaned forward, her expression grave. "Mr. Parker, I understand your pain, but the well-being of your son must be the priority here. Jenna has presented evidence that casts serious doubt on your biological relationship to Eli. We need to explore options that will ensure his stability and safety." Nolan's gaze darted between the mediator and me, his expression shifting from despair to rage. "Stability and safety? You think I'm going to let Jenna take my son away from me?" I steeled myself, knowing that the battle was far from over. "Nolan, I'm not trying to take Eli away from you, but I need to ensure his well-being, and that means proving my innocence and getting full custody." Nolan's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a snarl. "Over my dead body, Jenna. I'll fight you tooth and nail, and I'll make sure you never see Eli again." The mediator tried to interject, but Nolan was having none of it. He pushed himself up from the table, his chair clattering to the floor once more. "This is not over," he growled, his gaze fixed on me. "I'll destroy you, Jenna, and I'll take everything you hold dear." With that, he stormed out of the room, leaving me trembling with a mix of fear and determination. I knew that the war had only just begun. The aftermath of the mediated meeting was nothing short of chaos. Nolan's emotional unraveling had shaken me to the core, and I knew that the legal battle ahead would be an uphill climb. But I was more determined than ever to protect Eli and secure our future, no matter the cost. In the days that followed, I filed for divorce in full custody of Eli, presenting the overwhelming evidence that had been uncovered. Nolan's erratic behavior and threats only served to bolster my case, and the court ruled firmly in my favor. As the judge delivered the verdict, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Eli would be safe, and Nolan's control over our lives had been shattered. The settlement was substantial, a testament to the emotional distress and defamation I had endured. With my newfound financial freedom, I was able to leave our old life behind and start anew. I found a cozy little house not too far from Eli's school and set about creating a peaceful, nurturing environment for him. My family and friends rallied around us, offering their unwavering support and love. Eli, bless his heart, had weathered the storm with remarkable resilience. He seemed to sense the change in the air, the newfound sense of security and stability that enveloped us. Gone were the tense, uneasy silences that had once permeated our home, replaced by the sound of Eli's laughter and the gentle hum of our daily routines. As for Nolan, he had become a shadow of his former self. Stripped of his business and his financial resources, he struggled to find his footing. Attempts to reconcile with Eli were met with fierce resistance, and Jenna's pleas for visitation rights were repeatedly denied. I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for the man I had once loved, but any trace of that emotion was quickly drowned out by the memories of his cruelty and the trauma he had inflicted. He had chosen his path, and now he had to live with the consequences. In the weeks that followed, Eli and I began to heal, finding solace in the simple joys of our new life. We would spend lazy afternoons in the park, Eli's laughter ringing out as he chased after butterflies. At night, we would curl up on the couch, sharing stories and dreams, our bond growing stronger with each passing day. Slowly but surely, the wounds of the past began to mend, and a sense of hope and possibility took root in my heart. I knew that the road ahead would not be an easy one, but with Eli by my side and the support of my loved ones, I felt an unwavering determination to build a future filled with love, security, and the promise of a fresh start. As I tucked Eli into bed one night, his eyes sparkling with contentment, I couldn't help but smile. We had weathered the storm, and we had emerged stronger for it. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew that we would face them together, united in our resilience and our unwavering love.